Candy, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bomberger?
Here.
Commissioner Silver? Commissioner Nobles?
Here.
Commissioner Wong? Chair Kennedy?
Here.
Before we go to our next item, which is oral communications, we have a problem in time in terms of this meeting, so it seems rather not quite apropos in a way, but I'm wondering what time we should adjourn this. It seems that security is no longer applicable in this building at 6 o'clock, and therefore I would like the commissioners to think of adjourning this meeting 5:45, in any case, having a continuance if we're anywhere. This seems equitable because in all our meetings in the coast so far, we've gone, I think our latest meeting was 3 hours. They're just barely over 3 hours. So we should be able to finish our meeting today, I would say, in 4 hours. So if that is agreeable, I would like to adjourn this meeting. Gentlemen, what do you think? Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah?
Because if we don't, we have to arrange for all kinds of security and...
No.
No?
No. I mean, let's move
All right.
expeditiously.
Let's move expeditiously as we possibly can, so that would take care of this. Our next item is oral communications. This is an opportunity to allow the public to discuss on any matter that is not on the agenda. And if I have any speaker slips on this, we'll recognize you at this time. Candy, are those?
I believe they're all for the LCP.
Oh, for the LCP, okay. So with no further comment, we can go on to the consideration of the previous minutes. And
I move acceptance of the minutes as presented.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Candy, would you please introduce item number 5?
Item number 5, owner applicant Jim Rice, file number PLN 2000-00831. Consideration of a coastal development permit and grading permit exemption, certification of a negative declaration to legalize grading associated with a gully repair and road realignment widening and allow additional grading to repair a large gully at a different location. The project site is located at 2119 South Cabrillo Highway in the unincorporated Half Moon Bay area of San Mateo County. Project planner is Mike Shawlett.
As I understand this, staff has not had time to complete all the information on it, and they request a continuance until October 22nd at 2 o'clock.
That's correct.
May I have a motion to that effect for the continuance?
Move we continue the item to October 22nd at 2 o'clock.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're going to have a special consideration. We're going to skip for the moment to items 7 and 8 because Jim will not will be here only for those items. So if we could skip to items 7 and 8, correspondence and other matters, and consideration of a study session.
Okay.
Is that agreeable?
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Jim Agemeyer. And I'd like to move to item number 7, and I believe that you've received correspondence in your packages. I was wondering if you had any questions in regards to any of those.
No.
Okay,
No
great. And then item number 8 is the consideration of a study session for the next meeting. And I'd like to review with you the draft agenda that we're proposing at this time. It is a two-part agenda. It involves a public hearing here in San Mateo at 2 o'clock, which would be the Jim Rice item that you just continued. And then at 3 o'clock, we will be holding a hearing to consider an appeal of a decision by the zoning hearing officer for a home improvement exception. Then the commission would adjourn for dinner and reconvene at 7 o'clock in El Granada at the elementary school there. And the last part of the agenda includes a field trip for the Jim Rice item, and that would be on Monday, October 20th at 3 o'clock, departure from the county. So that's what we're proposing for the agenda on October 22nd.
Gentlemen, any problems?
No.
No problems.
All right, great. So
Let's accept it.
that's the end of my presentation for number 7 and 8.
I can only hope that you give us enough time to have dinner. That's my only hope.
I hope
Just
so.
15 minutes.
Well, to a certain extent, that's under our control.
Thank you.
All right. I do believe we can proceed. Candy, would you please introduce item number 6?
Item number 6, applicant San Mateo County Planning Director, file number PLN 2003-00438. Consideration of Midcoast LCP update project. Task 1, to recalculate the Midcoast residential build-out based on existing local coastal program policy. Task 2, determine the number of residential zone non-conforming parcels or substandard lots based on reliable count. And Task 5, evaluate the adequacy of existing development controls for non-conforming parcels. Consider merging substandard lots. Project Manager George Berkman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good afternoon. As Candy indicated in her opening remarks, that today's meeting is devoted to discussing tasks 1, 2, and 5 of the Midcoast LCP update. All right, thank you. Before continue with my presentation, I'd like to note that I have a packet of all the graphics that I'll be using during today's presentation. I've passed that out to the commission and to members of the audience, and they're available at the front of the room as well. In a little more detail, specifically Task 1 calls for recalculating Midcoast residential build-out based on existing local coastal program policy. Task 2 calls for determining the number of residential zone nonconforming parcels and substandard lots based on a reliable count. And Task 5 calls for evaluating the adequacy of existing development controls for nonconforming parcels and to consider merging substandard lots. Starting with Task 1, the term build-out refers to that point when all available land in the community has been developed to its full potential as permitted by planning policy. In other words, build-out is the planned endpoint of a community's growth. The existing LCP estimates Midcoast build-out to be 6,200 dwelling units. However, over the years, members of the Midcoast community have questioned the methodology that was used to calculate build-out in 1980, and particularly there have been concerns that certain land uses were left out, such as second units and houses on single substandard lots, to name 2. When recalculating residential build-out for this project, we manually mapped and counted every residential zone parcel using 2001 development data. The tabulation was based on existing LCP land use policy, and for this go-around, single substandard lots and second units were counted. In addition, the methodology assumed that contiguous substandard lots in common ownership would be merged consistent with the Task 5 proposal, which is also before you today, and I will be discussing. In essence, and as shown on the screen, there are approximately 719 existing residential units in the project area, and residential build-out is 6,733 units. As such, the Midcoast is about 55% build out. I'm not going to go over the itemized components. You can see, and it's in the staff report, how each of these land uses contribute to existing development and build out. What I would like to note is that the Midcoast Community Council supports acceptance of the recalculated build out numbers that staff had prepared. However, the council has concerns that there exists an unknown number of unpermitted second units in the Midcoast, and that these units aren't counted as existing development, and that they could contribute to exceeding the build-out limit. The council is correct that they are not counted as existing development because at present we do not know they exist, hence they're unpermitted, and if they are out there, they're in violation of our requirements, which requires a permit. As such, the council requests that some legalization procedure be enacted. This could involve aggressive code enforcement to locate unpermitted second units, or some amnesty process for owners to voluntarily come forward. Those are just two of other methods that could be discussed. I think the concern is if we have a formal count that, as you can see on the screen, limits second units to 466 units, and then at that point that is achieved, and then there's an informal count that we don't know about, we will have exceeded the 466 and hence build out. I would like now to move on to task number 2. This exercise involved determining the number of residential zone nonconforming parcels and substandard lots in the project area. I'd like to start by defining the terms. A nonconforming parcel is a building site whose area is less than the minimum parcel size required by the zoning district in which it's located. Thus, when the zoning requires 5,000 square feet as the minimum parcel size, a parcel that is a building site but less than 5,000 square feet is a non-conforming parcel. On the other hand, a substandard lot is a mapped and numbered entity, a numbered piece of land that was created by a subdivision tract, usually a major subdivision, and whose area is less than the minimum parcel size. As such, a non-conforming parcel, which is a building site, may be comprised of one or more substandard lots. And I've tried to illustrate this on the screen. If you look at the first illustration, that is a conforming parcel, if the minimum parcel size was 5,000 square feet, but it's comprised of two substandard lots, which were lots that were legally created as part of a major subdivision in the past. And those would be 2,500 square foot lots. The two together comprise a conforming parcel. The second illustration is a non-conforming parcel because it's a building site that would be in single ownership, but it's less than the 5,000 minimum parcel size, and it's comprised of one substandard lot. Here, the parcel boundary and the lot boundary happen to be the same. And then the second illustration is a non-conforming parcel that's comprised of two substandard lots. Here we have a 4,500 square foot parcel that's made up of two 22.5 square foot lots. So here I'm trying to show the distinction between lots and parcels. Now back to the exercise. For this tabulation, we again mapped and manually counted all residential substandard lots. Also, we again organized the data by potential to merge these lots into 5,000 square foot parcels based on the ownership pattern. In essence, as shown on the screen, there are 4,899 residential zone substandard lots in the Mid-Coast. Of these, 1,605 occur on undeveloped or vacant parcels, and 3,294 occur on developed parcels. The substandard lots that occur on vacant parcels are especially vulnerable to being sold off into separate building sites, and I'd like to just focus on those. And you can see this 1,605 lots that are on vacant parcels can be arranged, and this is the way we did it in as part of this exercise, into 944 lots could be merged into 472 parcels. There were 2-lot parcels. 354 lots could be merged into 118 3-lot parcels, and 36 lots could be merged into 9 parcels. 271 lots are in separate single ownership and no merger potential. So the bottom line here is, if you look at just vacant lots that are on vacant parcels, 1,600 lots could be merged into approximately 600 parcels from merging, in addition to the 271 single lot parcels. The substandard lots, as I indicated, on vacant parcels are especially vulnerable to being sold off, and that will be the reason I will focus on them when I talk about merging. And that's the segue into Task 5. In terms of background for Task 5, the Mid-Coast community has historically been concerned that, one, property owners can sell off substandard lots that are now in common ownership, thereby exceeding the planned build-out, and two, the community is concerned that substandard lot non-conforming parcels are susceptible to overbuilding, and that houses on these small parcels are too big for the parcel in which they're located. Because of these concerns, Task 5 has two main components. And one is to evaluate the development controls, the existing development controls for residential zone nonconforming parcels, and I'm going to talk about that first. And then number 2 is to determine whether to merge contiguous substandard lots in common ownership. So what I'm going to talk about first related to Task 5 is the evaluation of the existing development controls for residential zone nonconforming parcels, or as what the community has seen as an issue of overbuilding on small lots. This issue was addressed by your commission and the Board of Supervisors 3 years ago with the development of new zoning regulations to control mid-coast house size, scale, and appearance. The existing development controls for nonconforming parcels are summarized on the screen, and they involve a combination of methods, including house floor area, limiting house floor area, requiring a daylight plane or facade articulation, requiring design committee, review committee approval, and prohibiting exceptions. So what you see on the screen is the 5-pronged approach that the county currently has to controlling non-conforming parcel development. This package of controls was developed 3 years ago through a community-based task force that was led by Supervisor Gordon, and then went before the Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, and Coastal Commission. A chief element of this package was the development of, for the first time, of house size, or what are commonly known as floor area ratio controls. And in the Mid-Coast, we have a different standard, a more restrictive standard for nonconforming parcels, and that's the number 1 bullet on the screen. Limit house size to 0.48 times parcel size. For a conforming parcel, it is 0.53 times parcel size. In addition to regulating the size of the parcel in terms of square footage, the package also requires either a daylight plane, which moves the tallest part of the structure to the center of the parcel, or facade articulation features, which would be architectural features to break up the massiveness of a house, things that indent and recess, so to speak. The third element is, and this is an element that has been part of our review process for a long time, is to require a use permit for parcels that are smaller than 3,500 square feet. A non-conforming parcel is any parcel that's less than 5,000 square feet, let's say in the R1S17 district, but a use permit is only required for parcels smaller than 3,500 square feet. The fourth part of our existing regulations is that design review committee approval is required, and the fifth part is that the existing regulations prohibit exceptions to floor area and height. So that this together is the existing package of controls for development on a non-conforming parcel, vis-a-vis, if, as your commission probably has seen in the past, if a house is proposed on a 3,000 square foot parcel, the house size would be limited to 0.48 times 3,000. There'd be a requirement for daylight plane or facade articulation. There'd be a use permit required before the zoning hearing officer or your commission, depending on its location. There'd be design review committee review, and there'd be no exceptions that would be allowed for floor area and height. You could not apply for any type of administrative exception or other exceptions that we have. So that's the existing control for non-conforming controls. Those are the existing controls for non-conforming parcels. At the workshop, as I indicated earlier meetings, that we had a series of workshops over the course of a year on the Mid-Coast to discuss each of the 23 tasks. At the workshop where Task 5 was discussed, much time was spent discussing the City of Half Moon Bay's approach to controlling house size, or their floor area ratio, on non-conforming parcels. Their approach is known as the proportionality rule. This approach is more restrictive than the existing county house size limit, which I've told you is 0.48 times parcel size, and it's particularly more restrictive since it limits house size proportionate to the amount of nonconformity. And what that means is, if a house is 1/2 of the minimum parcel size, that, let's say, a 2,500 square foot parcel where the minimum parcel size is 5,000 square feet, then the house size would have to be half of what is allowed, half of what the zoning standard is. So, to give an example, the zoning standard in Half Moon Bay is 0.5 times parcel size. If you're on a parcel that's half the minimum parcel size, it has to be half again. So it'd be half, 0.5 times 0.5 or 0.25. There are some exceptions for garages.
Through the chair, if I might, I just want to be sure that I understand. If the minimum parcel size is 5,000 square feet, and the parcel is half of that, 2,500.
Right.
And if the FAR allowed is 0.5, or half the parcel area, on a normal-sized parcel, that's a 2,500-foot house. So far, so good. I mean, that's, now, if the parcel size is half of that, is that then saying that the maximum house size, that simply you apply the 0.5 but to the smaller parcel, or that you cut it in half again?
You cut it in half again.
That's what I thought I heard. I just
Yes,
wanted to be sure.
that is what you heard. So that's hence the name proportionality. So if the parcel is 1/2 the requirement, then the standard would be 1/2.
Right, so if it
So-
was normally 50% coverage, it'd be 25% coverage, or
Right.
25%
Well, not
coverage.
coverage times parcel area, but you're the same point, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you, so,
So
if you
instead
have
of,
a point, so if you have a 2,500 square foot parcel, and using the proportionality rule, 0.5 parcel size is the standard. It's half out of sync, so that you do 0.5 times that makes it 0.25. The FAR for that parcel is 0.25 times 2,500, whereas in the county, it's 0.48 times 2,400. And that leads you to the chart that's on the screen.
Right.
So, in the county, we use 0.48 parcel size for a 2,500 square foot parcel. In Half Moon Bay, there's the proportionality rule. There is, because it is very restrictive for a 2,500 square foot parcel, Half Moon Bay allows to add on 200 square feet for a garage in the situation of a 2,500 square foot parcel. That garage adjustment isn't applicable to a 3,000 square foot parcel. So let's look at a 3,000 square foot parcel. When it's all played out, if we just forget the multipliers and all that, in the county, one would be allowed to construct a 1,440 square foot parcel on the 3,000 square foot parcel, whereas in Half Moon Bay, you would be limited to a 900 square foot house, period, including the garage, everything. So there is a comparative chart between the proportionality rule that's used in Half Moon Bay and with the county currently, the county's development controls, which I've just gone over. At the workshop, we also discussed another approach to controlling development of nonconforming parcels, and this relates to providing an incentive for building an affordable housing unit on a nonconforming parcel. In essence, this approach establishes an incentive for owners of small lots to build an affordable housing unit, but doesn't require it. It's an incentive. And likewise, it provides a disincentive to build a market rate unit. Specifically, with this proposal, for parcels that are smaller than 4,500 square feet, minimum parcel size would be 5,000, but out of a feeling for fairness or equity, we thought that this option would be best applied for parcels less than 4,500 rather than just being a bit off 5,000. Anyway, this alternative would give the owner a choice of either to build a market rate unit where the floor area limit would be reduced from 0.48 to 0.39 parcel size, or build an affordable unit with income and cost restrictions, and in that case the benefit or the incentive would be increasing the house size or the floor area limit to 0.53 the parcel size, or equivalent to what we allow for conforming parcels. So the way this plays out is if you had, let's use the 3,000 square foot parcel again in the middle. Under existing zoning with the 0.48, that works out to be 1,440 square feet, as I showed in the last alternative. With the affordable housing incentive approach, if a person proposed a market rate unit, they have that option. The FAR, or excuse me, the house size limit or floor area limit would be reduced to 0.39 parcel size, and hence there would be, the allowable house size would be reduced to 1,170 square feet, whereas currently 1,440 is allowed. On the other hand, if they chose to build an affordable unit, the allowable house size would be increased to 1,590 square feet, which is a larger, an increased floor area limit, and the one that is used usually for standard size parcels. Now I'm going to show you all three of them on one sheet and how people weighed in at the workshop and who's recommending what. Okay, I've gone over three alternatives for controlling non-conforming parcel development. Briefly, I described the status quo, the one that was developed through a community-based task force, went through your planning commission and the Board of Supervisors 3 years ago. That's a house size limit of 0.48 for non-conforming parcels, plus a daylight plane or facade articulation requirement, a use permit if you're less than 3,500 square feet, design review, committee review, and no exceptions to height or floor area. That is the recommendation of staff, to continue with the package of limits that was developed through a participatory program recently, 3 years ago. And so staff is recommending the current approach. Also, one half of the workshop participants on that evening also endorsed that approach. The approach that's endorsed by the Midcoast Community Council and a third of the workshop participants at the meeting that night would be Half Moon Bay's proportionality rule with regard to house size, and then the other are remaining elements of the status quo alternative. So without putting the chart back up, if you look at parcels that are between 2,500 and 3,500 square feet, the house size is somewhere between 0.3 and 0.35 parcel size with Half Moon Bay's approach. And then this alternative would also keep what we're doing now with respect to daylight plane, use permit, design review, and no exceptions, but it would lower the floor area limit. And that is recommended by the Midcoast Community Council. And then the affordable housing incentive, which I've just gone over, that was endorsed by about 14% of those that were participating at the meeting that night. I earlier indicated that members of the Midcoast community have expressed concerns that build-out will be exceeded if substandard lots are sold off into separate ownership. It is true that presently contiguous substandard lots in common ownership can be split off legally to create a new non-conforming parcel building site, thereby increasing residential build-out and density. To counter this, state and county subdivision law authorizes the ability to combine certain substandard lots, which is known as lot merger. With lot merger, adjoining lots in common ownership can be combined into a single parcel, thereby reducing the number of potentially buildable sites or buildable parcels. More specifically, the county may merge lots that are contiguous and in common ownership if at least one lot is undeveloped and less than 5,000 square feet in size. For the past 20 or so years, the county has interpreted state merger law to allow merger up to 5,000 square foot parcel size, but no greater, even if the minimum parcel size is 10,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet, which are found at certain locations in the Midcoast. However, County Council is currently researching whether there is legal authority to merge up to a larger minimum parcel size, such as 4 2,500 square foot lots into a 10,000 square foot parcel. Currently, the county has a limited case-by-case merger policy that merges substandard lots that are less than 3,500 square feet and only in the R1S17 zoning district. And this merger, the reason I called it case-by-case, it only occurs when an application has been received by the county to construct, enlarge, or demolish a house. So when an application is submitted to us to either construct, enlarge, or demolish a house, we will then look at that time at the ownership pattern. We will determine if it meets the minimum requirements for this merger policy in the R1S17 zoning district, which is the orange area on the map, and we will merge at that time of development. Staff believes that this case-by-case approach is not as effective as one that comprehensively merges all residential zone substandard lots at one time instead of waiting for a development application. The most endorsed merger approach that was discussed at the workshop involves three facets, and these are shown on the screen. It would comprehensively merge contiguous substandard lots that are in common ownership on a vacant parcel. Secondly, it would comprehensively merge a substandard lot on a vacant parcel with any contiguous developed parcel that was in common ownership. And in these two instances, vacant substandard lots are being merged since they are especially vulnerable to being sold off as separate building sites. And the third facet of this proposal is to merge substandard lots on developed parcels at the time an application is submitted to enlarge or demolish the existing house. To go over this, one approach that was discussed at the workshop, and which is the staff recommendation, as you'll see later in the presentation, is to, for situations like the top illustration, where we have substandard lots on a vacant parcel, we would merge them now comprehensively. We would do it all at once throughout the study area. We would follow the process that is established in our county subdivision regulations and mirrored by, and which mirrors the state subdivision map act. And through that process at one time, we would attempt to merge vacant lots in common ownership that are contiguous on lots on a vacant parcel as shown in the top illustration. The second situation is kind of a blur between vacant and developed. There are some situations out there, not many. We've counted this. I think there are about 75 lots that fall into this category, where you have a developed parcel that's contiguous in common ownership with a vacant parcel, much like the second illustration. In that case, that vacant parcel is just as vulnerable to being sold off as the vacant lot as the lots above. So we're also proposing that those lots and parcels indicated in the second illustration be merged now through a comprehensive program. For the third situation are the remaining developed parcels, and these are the least vulnerable because they're currently being used by the house. And we would recommend, the proposal involves merging them at the time the house is enlarged or demolished. So basically, we're focusing in on vacant lots or lots on vacant parcels and merging them now because they're vulnerable to being sold off, and going more case by case with the lots on developed parcels.
May I ask a question through the chair at this point? George, I understand that in the last case, it would seem logically like there's no downside to, I mean, obviously if there's a house that's astride three non-conforming parcels, one of them can't be sold off while the house is still there. And if at such point as the house is removed, merger is required, then they can't be sold off. But what is the downside to just simply, for simplicity's sake, going ahead and merging sooner? Is it a legal downside where it's better to make it contingent on this later action?
I don't think it's a legal downside, and County Council can chime in if he wishes. It's more of allocation of staff resource. I kept on using the term vulnerable. It's like setting a priority. If you have limited resources, let's try to merge the ones that are most susceptible to be sold off.
I see, because
and this is what our feeling was, that the lots on vacant parcels are more susceptible than lots on
it's not as
developed
simple as just simply adding a line to a merger ordinance that, well, we'll include these two. It's really going to require staff time to identify those, to go through.
Exactly. And
I understand.
And actually, we don't even have to add a line to a merger. We have the legislation in place to do all three that are shown in the screen. It's whether getting a green light from your commission and the board to do that.
Right. No, I understand how it sounds like, indeed, it's one thing to identify them theoretically. It's another thing to go out and say, well, this is the case. We've studied it, and here's how it fits in. And that's, yeah. Thank you.
So it's more of a policy conclusion rather than a legal conclusion.
I have a
One
question.
moment.
Through the chair. Would you remind me again how many houses were in that third category there?
Oh,
Merged
yes.
at the time? It wasn't a very large number, was it?
Said 71.
71?
Well,
Hold on a second.
the middle one, I thought you said 74, or 70-something. The house is stride 2, but with a third that could be sold off.
Okay, I don't have the number of parcels in front of me. What I had said was that, okay, the lion's share, let me put this projector on here. There we go. Okay, in terms of making a cut of do the lots appear on developed parcels or undeveloped parcels? Most of the lots are on developed parcels. That means that people have voluntarily combined them, not merged them, but combined them by virtue of building a house over those lots or on those properties. So over 3,000 lots out there are in the third category. I couldn't tell you the number of parcels, but the third category, which means there's a house on the parcel, and it could be made up of 2 or more lots. So you could have a 3-lot, like I showed in my diagram, you could have a 3-lot parcel that has a house on it. Those 3 lots would be part of the 3,000 that's in the top citation up there. Most, I would say I'd say 3/4 of the lots out there are tied up with developed parcels. About a quarter are on undeveloped parcels, and we're trying to focus on the ones on undeveloped parcels.
So it would significantly
sorry,
increase the total job, I mean, the size of the merger problem if you did include those.
Well, yes.
It sounds like it might
It would,
double
it would, I'll put it this way, if we were to comprehensively merge all of them, it would be 3 times again, or 2.5 times again, if we have 16, let's see, 1632. Oh, actually, it divides into thirds. About a third of the lots are on undeveloped parcels, and 2/3 are on developed parcels. So it'd be adding 2 times again the effort for vacant.
Three times the work for very little additional results in the near term.
So I can,
yes, that's true.
I can see the advantage of putting that off.
Yes.
As long as it doesn't fall through the cracks later, or policies don't get changed later.
Of course.
Well, and it's not putting it off doing nothing. It's waiting until the applicant, the person who owns that house, comes in for an enlargement or a demolition and doing it at that time. So, and particularly in the case of the demolition, that's returning it back to the vacant status.
Right.
And where it's vulnerable again.
As long as our policies remain in place and nothing ends up falling through the cracks when someone comes in for a demolition permit and it doesn't get picked up, it sounds like there's zero downside to doing it at that time.
Close to zero. I don't want to get too complicated. Let me put the thing here. Okay, it's close to zero. In all honesty, when we look up a parcel, it'll tell us it's developed. We know there's a house somewhere on those 3 lots. We don't know where. By looking at the assessor's roll and not going out, by not going out to the site, we don't know if that house is located on these 2 or these 2. I'm sorry, I should use a pen here.
No, that's all right. I
For
understand.
illustration purposes, I put that in the center, but it could be located on 2, and though the parcel is indicated as a developed parcel, someone still could sell off 1 lot. So it's less vulnerable, but still vulnerable. We wouldn't know, by our resources and the data we have, we wouldn't know where that house is located on that parcel.
Now, George, I'm sure you covered this, but just help me with this. What's the case up above? You've got the house clearly astride 2 of them, and then but you've got a solid line with that third parcel.
And that solid line, and that's the reason we're merging it now. We know that third lot is a separate parcel and is vacant because our data source says it's vacant and it has a separate number. So in those category, the second category, we know that parcel is vacant, and that's the reason we want to include it in merging now. The third category, we don't know where the house sits on that parcel.
To further clarify, would I be correct in saying that there may be cases, let's call this going, starting at the top, we've got case 1, case 2, and case 3, or class 3. Are there, it sounds like there's the possibility that you might find situations in class 3 that actually could be moved up into set 2 if you had the additional data.
Yes, that's correct.
So there is some danger.
That's the reason I didn't want to just blithely say yes, 100%.
Okay,
yes,
it would
yes.
sound like if we do have to triage because of resources, that there might be some wisdom in considering
That's correct.
having a work program that would get around to looking at those and not just waiting for them to come in.
That's true, and
Well-
and maybe as an option, which hasn't been discussed to date, you may want to consider this as your commission. Maybe instead of just saying, well, for that third category, we'll merge at time the house is enlarged or demolished, we can do that, but not have it end there. We could say, you may consider directing staff to do 1 and 2 now. When that's done, if there are time and resources available, do 3 comprehensively.
well,
Yes, or look at the detail of 3 and find, are there ones that really should have been moved up into 2, but we just didn't know?
Okay, that would be very hard to do.
Oh, okay. It's easier just to go ahead and merge them.
Unilaterally just do it.
Understood.
Because you would have to go out and inspect and measure houses on the site, and
It's
it
not
would be a
worth it.
nightmare. It's not-
Understood,
Okay.
understood.
I see.
Okay. Now, oops, upside down, sorry. Using transparency.
There's a lot that's upside down today, but not in here.
Touche.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I've just described the first alternative, which is the comprehensive lot merger. And so I would like to jump to the second alternative that's shown, which is case-by-case lot merger. This was an option that was discussed at the workshop instead of the comprehensive lot merger. This one does not involve comprehensively merging lots at the same time, but rather continuing and expanding on the current policy of case-by-case merging at the time of development, that is when a house is built, enlarged, or destroyed. The reason I say continuing and expanding on the current limited lot merger program that we have now is only in the R1S17 zoning district. We have 3 residential zoning districts. We actually have more than that because we have the R3. We have at least 4 residential zoning districts that could be affected by this. Our current approach only is the R1S17, though it is the largest, the orange area. Also, there's a caveat in the current program that says one of the lots has to be 3,500 square feet or smaller. If that was removed and we just said any lot that's under 5,000, which is the way a typical merger occurs, which would be the proposal here, that would widen it. So basically the case-by-case merger approach is, to the extent allowed by law, merge substandard lots when, I just noticed that that's not worded right, but anyway, when a house is constructed, enlarged, or demolished. It shouldn't say on developed parcels. It should just say merge substandard lots when a house is constructed, enlarged, or demolished. So that's the second alternative. Moving back to the top one, which is the one I explained in more detail, the comprehensive lot merger, which had those 3 illustrations, that is recommended by staff, that is recommended by the Mid-Coast Community Council, and it's recommended by about 2/3 of those that participated in the workshop that night. In summary, well, the 3 bullets are basically the 3 illustrations that I showed you. The case-by-case lot merger option, that was recommended by a little over 1/3 of the participants of the workshop that night. And again, it's to merge substandard lots when a house is constructed, enlarged, or demolished in all residential districts to the extent allowed by law. So basically, not do a comprehensive merger program, but do it when people come in with an application. Before closing, I'd like to note that although the Mid-Coast Community Council recommends the comprehensive lot merger alternative, the council also requests that in the R1S94 zoning district at Miramar, where the minimum parcel size is 10,000 square feet, that we should merge to 10,000 square feet, not 5,000. And in the R1 S105 zoning district at Seal Cove in Moss Beach, where the minimum parcel size is 20,000 square feet, we should merge to that parcel size. As I indicated earlier, County Council is currently researching whether there's legal authority to merge up to a larger minimum parcel size than 5,000 square feet. However, I should note that this week we researched the implication of merging to a larger minimum parcel size and found out that due to the past merging that occurred in 1980 up to 10,000 and 20,000 respectively, and the current ownership pattern, this approach would only reduce build-out by about less than 10 parcels. So it's really academic to make the distinction between merging between 5,000 and 10,000, 20,000 in this jurisdiction.
It's pretty much already been done.
It's pretty much already been done, exactly.
Except, with the exception of someone in a particular neighborhood who may say, it may only be one, but I'm living next to it.
Well, that's true, and that's
Yeah.
but that's the reason I said
Yeah.
it would reduce build-out by, we
Yeah.
see it by less than 10 parcels, but that's less than 10 parcels.
Right.
Okay, and County Council is researching that. In closing, staff recommends that your commission take action according to the revised recommendation. I passed out a revised recommendation. The substance is exactly the same as what's in the staff report. What I did, again, I did, sorry. Again, what I did was I tried to clarify those three illustrations, and after the staff report went out, I came up with clearer language that I thought would make the distinction between those three illustrations. So the policy has not changed. The only thing that's changed in the revised recommendation is clear, less unambiguous language that that describes those three illustrations I showed earlier for lot merger. And with that, I conclude my staff presentation.
Gentlemen, questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Please,
If
Dave.
we go back to the implication of affordable housing incentive, that slide,
Okay, sure.
Now, you put this together to just give us an option?
This was, yes, this was an alternative that we developed about a year ago, actually, for the workshop. And it was actually discussed at the community workshop, and I'm now presenting it to your commission. It was not widely endorsed. About, I'd say about 14% of the workshop participants endorsed it. And staff is recommending the current approach. That's my opening comments.
Okay, I was just curious as to actually how it would apply if you have a single owner builder. Someone owns a lot and wants to build a house. I mean, how does he build an affordable house as opposed to a market rate house for himself to live in?
Well, I think the affordability restriction comes in when a person sells it.
I see.
I would imagine. I think Mark and Lisa could answer that a little bit better. But my understanding, yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, I think, again, this is an idea that we came up with early on in this process, and it wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot of support for it. We didn't develop it to a large degree in terms of the details of how it would work. So a lot of this is just speculation and would need further investigation if you were to be interested in this alternative. But there would be an agreement that would need to be entered into with the county as a condition of the building permit or coastal development permit or whatever permit was required for the construction of the home, and that would be recorded, an agreement with the county that would agree to keep the sales price if it was a for sale unit at a certain level, and that would be recorded and run with the land. So there would be an agreement that would be entered into.
Can I just, to follow up on that, not that it would need to be handled this way, but typically where affordable units are created, it might, for instance, just use the city of Palo Alto as an example. The city set up or was involved in setting up the Palo Alto Housing Corporation. If there's an affordable unit that's sold, when it's sold with a deed restriction, gives the Palo Alto Housing Corporation the right of first refusal, and then sets a formula by which the resale price back to the Palo Alto Housing Corporation will be set. Now, if someone,
Yeah,
in a
that's
case
one
where
way
someone
that
is
could be set.
building a house that they want to live in, I would imagine the way you make that work is say, okay, fine, go ahead, and here's the permits, build the house, and there's an agreement that when and if, you may keep this for your entire life, but when your estate, whether it's you decide to sell or your estate sells the house, a quasi-public agency of some type that's committed to the public, to maintaining affordability of units, has the right of first refusal to buy at either a predetermined price, or given the ravages of inflation, it may be a predetermined price plus some type of inflation or interest factor that would derive a future price, from which a future price could be derived, that would maintain the affordability of the unit, and then that way the house would stay in, for lack of a better term, I'll call it the public domain, where it is then used to serve the public good, and would be sold and resold and remain affordable if, and I presume that certainly in Palo Alto, my understanding is this goes on in perpetuity, that there's no provision for the units to become unaffordable at some point in the future. So I would think that if we're interested in pursuing that, and I certainly want to hear what the public thinks about this, but I would think that would be a mechanism similar to that.
Exactly.
It could be used to see that something remains affordable and that some future buyer doesn't create a windfall by buying it cheap and then turning around and selling it high either a day or a year or 10 years later.
Yeah, there's different ways to structure those types of agreements, and we didn't really work out those details, but it would be something along those lines,
Right.
certainly.
Right.
We'd have to work further on developing that.
George, I have one question. I should not be stepping into these muddy waters because I think I'm going to get a little bit of dirt on me, but there's incredible incentives, I see, or disincentives, not to build on non-conforming lots. That's fine. That's a philosophical idea. It's an idea of building a total build-out of the total number of houses. But just for my own information, what happens to those 271 lots that cannot be built upon? I assume, if I heard correctly, those definitely cannot be conjoined or merged on your research.
Yes.
So do we turn those into public parks?
No,
or
no, no.
What can we do with those?
Okay, first of all, what I had stated was that they cannot be merged. I didn't say that they cannot be built on. Those are non-conforming parcels. They are building sites, and those would be the types of parcels that would come in for the use permit. They have the right to build a house if it's subject to a use permit, if it's a legal building site, if it's a lot that was created through a subdivision or some legal action, and just by shifts in ownership, it happens to be in single ownership or not in common ownership with anything around it, they would have the right to come in and apply for a building permit, and would be before, if it was less than 3,500 square feet, would be before the zoning hearing officer or your body with a use permit request. And you would be, the part of your review would be to assure that the house is proportionate to the parcel size. The house size limit of 0.48 times parcel size gets at that. We have the daylight plane and facade articulation that you'd be scrutinized. You'd be taking public testimony. There'd be no exceptions to the height and floor area, but it would be a buildable site
For a very, very, very small house
for a
indeed.
very small house.
And
But with the incentive for a low income, if somebody had some great ideas on.
They would be allowed a larger house.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much.
To the chair,
Just please, Bill.
just go back to that, the 271 lot.
Yes.
The reason they can't merge is based on because there's adjacent
nothing-
lots already been built, or
Well-
just,
Well, first of all, a local government agency is only allowed to merge lots that are in common ownership. You cannot merge lots that are owned by two different parties. So these would be when I say separately owned or single-owned lots, these were lots that where one person owns that lot but doesn't own anything around it.
right.
So it's kind of a residual single lot, and it's not mergeable because that owner doesn't own anything around it.
Okay, but there is a possibility it could though, if one owner decided wanted to sell to the other owner.
Oh, true, if lots came into common ownership, then they would be then viewed at that time as susceptible to merging. What we do is we look at the ownership pattern at the time that we're contemplating an action. And so for this exercise, I reviewed, it was in 2001, it was basically end of summer 2001 when we did all of our analysis and counting of parcels, and those were the conclusions reached at that time. Now, since then, a person may have purchased a lot next to them, and if your commission and the board authorizes merging, there may be one additional parcel that two additional lots that may be merged.
So,
Uh,
I'm sorry, I guess, is the county or does anybody have encouraged or talked to these owners regarding about merging these lots so that it makes sense that you have a conforming lot that you can build or, instead of,
It can be argued that the market, the housing market itself satisfies a bit of that because we have heard that it's more desirable and less expensive to build a house on a conforming parcel than on a non-conforming parcel. So there may be there most likely is an inducement for people to combine lots voluntarily, and that's the reason I showed the graphic that 2/3
from Half Moon Bay, right?
Well, no, I was going to say 2/3 of the substandard lot are non-conforming. No, substandard lots are on developed parcels where owners did combine them to build a house.
Okay.
They chose either to acquire 2,500 square foot lots, so they now have 5,000, or they just purchased two together for that reason.
It would certainly seem that if a policy like Half Moon Bay has, would increase that incentive markedly because obviously you get a lot more bang for your buck if you can bring together a conformity than a non-conformity in that case.
I'm not really, I really should make a I'm not in a place to make a market decision because you would, even in the Half Moon Bay case, your end product is you'd have two houses versus one house.
Right, but
And
but at least as opposed to having two somewhat larger houses, you'd have two much smaller houses. And so if there is an incentive, perhaps I should have stated
Well,
that
no,
more
I
carefully.
think, but it's instead of two smaller houses, you'd have one larger house. Because you brought two lots together to create a conforming parcel. Whereas if you sold them off separately, you'd end up with two small houses.
Right.
Or-
What I think I was trying to say was with a policy like Half Moon Bay has, the two smaller houses are a lot smaller.
Yes.
And so whatever incentive there may be to combine the two parcels to have one larger house would be a much greater incentive because instead of, say, two somewhat smaller houses, you'd have two very much smaller houses as opposed to one larger house.
I would say that that's probably
Whether it's
true
an adequate incentive would involve a market analysis, and we don't have that data before us.
Right, but I
we
think
can, it stands to,
rule of thumb, it stands to reason that if
Yeah.
you're allowed .48 now, and in Half Moon Bay you're allowed .33, there's more of an incentive to build where you can build .48 than where you can build .33,
Yeah.
and take it a step further, putting the two together to build one house that's bigger too.
right.
I hear your point.
George, what about the case where the substandard lots contiguous are owned by different members of the same family?
I'll turn to Mike Murphy on that one.
Yeah, the ownership has to be the same, and that is one issue that we certainly ran into, with other merger programs is, for instance, if you have a couple and the husband owns one as his own property and sole ownership, and the other is held in joint tenancy, they're not common ownership for purposes of the merger ordinance. The idea is the ownership has to be the same, because when you combine them, you only have one parcel, and legally you can't have one parcel with two different ownerships. So it is an issue. I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule. For instance, if husband and wife own one in joint tenancy and the other in some other form of ownership, then in that case we'd take a look at it and possibly merge in that case. But it is an issue, and the problem is because of the nature of property ownership and the state law of real property. All we have the authority to do is merge properties, and if ownership is different, it creates that problem under state law. You'd have.
Doesn't that mean that a loophole exists that can be used to circumvent the intent
If
of
people,
the ordinance?
well, I I guess it's sort of like with taxes. One person's loophole is another person's evasion. Yeah, it is a problem, and I know when the merger law was first created, because the process at that time didn't allow for merger until you ended the process. You had a lot of people that figured it out and were going into separate ownership before the end of the process when merger occurred. Now the law, if you're going to merge, allows you to file a notice of intent to merge, and legally that precludes during the process where you're going through to determine all, and allow the hearing and everything, it precludes people from selling off. So there have been modifications over the year to try and close that loophole, but there's certainly nothing that prevents someone from anticipating and, saying, oh, I'm worried, I think the county's about to engage in it, and start to put property into separate ownership. There's nothing legally that can be done to prevent that.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that I've left all my graphics up here, and as members of the public come to speak, they can feel free to use them in speaking to your commission.
Thank you kindly, George. We appreciate it. Everybody is, okay. We have only 8 speakers that I have speaker slips for. I'm wondering, due to time constraints, if we don't grant what? I would like to, 5 minutes if possible, but I think we'll, more are coming in. Let's grant 5 minutes and see if we can hold to that, please. That way we should be able to do it. I'll try to read these off twice, 2 in a row, I should say. First would be Jonathan Wintner, is that correct? Followed by Pat, it looks like Corey, am I correct? Well, Jonathan Wintner.
Which one is, Jonathan Whitwer?
Whitworth.
Does this need to go back on there?
We can,
Okay,
It's a very sensitive mic, so
Yeah.
it'll pick up your voice.
okay, thank you. My name is Jonathan Whitwer. I am the General Counsel for the Granada Sanitary District, which asked me to attend this meeting and address your commission on this subject. I have distributed previously a letter on Granada Sanitary District letterhead signed by the president of the board of Granada Sanitary District, and I'm sure you all have that. I saw it
Yep.
outside, and so I'm not going to go over all of that, but I am going to attempt to summarize and maybe amplify a couple of the points. The Granada Sanitary District is very concerned about this. Okay.
You don't need to pull it too close. It's very close. It's extremely sensitive.
Let's put it back where it started. Is this better? Is that working?
it's fine in front of us. How about the rear of the auditorium, we're fine? Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Marcia.
Yes, thank you. The sanitary district is interested in this, as your staff report indicates, not merging. If you didn't have a merger program, that would add to the burden on the infrastructure providers, and Granada Sanitary District is one of those providers. In Granada Sanitary District's case, it appears to us that if there were no merger program, we could be looking at approximately 25% greater wastewater demand, sewer demand, over what we were anticipating based on the prior methodology for calculating build-out. And so because of that, that's a pretty significant number to us. And I distributed to all of you about 3 pages out of a report that the Sanitary District commissioned back in 1999 that basically shows with merger, it would appear to us that we're looking at approximately 3,428 connections, and without it, 4,281 connections. So that's a big part of the reason that we're here to support the staff recommendation with regard to the merger program. I would also indicate that we have wet weather sewage overflows. We're not the only sanitary district that has that. It's a nationwide problem. But it is the next problem that's being tackled, again, I think it's fair to say on a nationwide basis. There have been nationwide regulations developed for this, and they're under consideration right now. Nevertheless, GSD, Granada Sanitary District, as part of the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, is concerned about eliminating those. We had a rather strong speech by the SAM interim manager about 4 months ago about concern with fines from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Now, that has not happened, but his concern, I think, was very strong that we do whatever we can to minimize the chance of wet weather sewage overflows. And one of the things that we can do is to come to a meeting like this and ask you as the land use authority or the recommenders to the Board of Supervisors to approve this merger program. So that's why we want you to approve the merger program. I would also like to mention to you another possibility that I hope you will consider and recommend, or at least ask the Board of Supervisors to consider, and that is a program that a number of counties have that's called a Parcel Legality Status Determination Program or process. Our general manager and myself met with George Bergman and Mike Murphy over a year ago now to talk about our concerns having to do with these non-conforming parcels. And since that time, there has been a unanimous California Supreme Court decision, Gardner versus the County of Sonoma. And in that case, the County of Sonoma declined to recognize as legal parcels some pre-1893 parcels. And the California Supreme Court unanimously supported the County of Sonoma in doing that. And in their opinion, they gave the rationale basically as prior to 1893, and it also happens to be true that it's prior to 1929, counties and cities did not have the authority to review the design and improvements, infrastructure improvements included, by and large. They could approve roads, but they didn't have any ability to review sanitary sewer provisions, for example. And so since the counties and cities didn't have the authority to even review that, they should not be bound by these old maps because they never had a chance to decide whether there was adequate infrastructure being provided or adequate other design or improvement aspects. So with that in mind, we believe that the decision from the California Supreme Court has laid the groundwork by their reasoning would allow parcel legality status determinations to go all the way to 1929. And your current LCP actually has language that I've set forth in my letter that would allow you as a county to review the legality of these parcels on a case-by-case basis when they came before you. It does occur to me that that may also help address the question about loopholes that I've heard, that there may be, if it was done on a case-by-case basis, an opportunity to address that issue. So we would hope that you would ask the Board of Supervisors to consider that option as well. And in conclusion, I would just say that we're asking you to consider basically all of the approaches that have been put before you. We have not analyzed the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule, and we haven't analyzed the MCC proposal about not allowing development if a parcel is less than 88% of the required zoning. But both of those would appear to have the result of reducing the amount of wastewater that is produced, and that's what Granada Sanitary District needs to be concerned with. And so we're asking you to make a recommendation to the board that would reduce the impact of these non-conforming parcels. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to
Yeah.
answer them.
Well, I have a question of council. If we were to recognize this decision which applied to lots that were merged prior to 1929, and some of the lots which we now consider legal would be decided or not legal, what would be the disposition of those lots?
Well, I do want to say one thing. We were involved in a lawsuit that eventually got resolved because the applicant withdrew their application where this issue was involved. Mr. Whitwer represented a private party in that. This very issue was there. Our position was and still is, and it was litigation that the board that the board authorized us to take the position that the Gardner case applied to pre-1893 maps, and that's what it applied to. So we still have a difference of opinion here. It's an issue that is still out there. It hasn't been actually litigated to the point where we have an appeal court decision one way or another. Essentially, the position as applied to the community of El Granada would mean that any lots that were not conveyed into separate ownership before 1945 would be illegal. And you're talking about a community that has got its road network largely built out, that has sewer services and everything else. So that would be the effect of it, is that in any case where you go back and show that there had not been a sale into separate ownership before 1945, even if it had been sold into separate ownership afterwards on reliance on the maps that were filed, they'd be illegal. And so the implications are fairly significant because the way I understand Granada Sanitary District's regulations, and I don't want to speak specifically, but it might impact the ability to get service and things of that nature. So it does have a wide-ranging effect. But the legal issue is one that we disagreed with at this point. So.
Fine, thank you, Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Did
you
you
so
want me
much.
to
No,
answer that or respond in any way? All we're asking you to do is to consider that and ask that the board consider it. And this is another opportunity to do that in a broader fashion, yes.
Excellent, thank you so kindly. Ann Corey, is that correct? Carrie? Lenny Roberts, you're next.
Good afternoon.
Sorry about that, Ann.
That's okay. First, I'd like to thank the county and George Bergman and his staff for undertaking the tedious and time-consuming task of recalculating build-out. Now policy can be based on information that's derived from accurate data, and concern expressed repeatedly over the past years regarding development on substandard lots that had not been calculated into build-out can finally be put to rest. I agree with staff's recommendations for tasks 1, 2, and 5. In regards to the 271 substandard parcels that cannot be merged, I believe that these parcels provide an excellent opportunity for moderate-priced housing. Just 5 years ago, 67% of home sales on the coast side were under $500,000. Now, only 16% of sales are under $500,000. Development on these substandard parcels can provide homes for those who cannot qualify for affordable housing and cannot also afford the average home price on the coast side of $716,000. I agree with staff that the county should retain the existing non-conforming development controls. I believe that the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule would cause new homes on non-conforming parcels to be inconsistent in size with the character of the existing homes in the neighborhood and would dissuade the building of moderate-priced housing. the county's development controls are more restrictive for nonconforming parcels, and therefore they provide incentive for owners to merge lots. And yet, for those parcels that cannot be merged, for example, those that are surrounded by development, the county's development controls allow development of homes which will be in character with the neighborhood and in a moderate price range. In regards to the affordable housing incentive alternative, the ability to build a larger home may not create an incentive for a builder to build an affordable home rather than a smaller market rate home if the builder plans to put that house on the market. I can see the incentive for a builder who plans to live in the home. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very
One
kindly.
question.
One moment.
Through the chair. If I'm understanding what you're saying, and I just want to be sure that I do, if a regulation like Half Moon Bays is in place in proportionality,
Right.
you're saying that would discourage or mean the homes built would be less affordable? Did I misunderstand?
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, if you've got let's say we've got non-conforming parcels that are identical.
Right.
One, everything about them alike, except one has the current county rules applying to it. The other has the Half Moon Bay type rules applying to it.
Right.
You end up with a smaller home on the Half Moon Bay parcel. Did
Right.
I understand you to say that that home would be less affordable than the house built under the current county regs?
No. I'm saying that you have 270 lots that for some reason cannot be merged.
Right.
And most likely they're surrounded by development. So they're probably surrounded by conforming parcels. So if
Right.
you have 5,000 square foot lots around it, you'll have 2,500 square foot homes.
Right.
And so on that particular lot, at least under the county, you'll have about a 1,200 square foot home if it's a smaller lot. But under the Half Moon Bay plan, you'll have something like a 900 square foot
Right.
lot. So it seems like it would be more in conformance with the character. to
I
have
understood
homes.
that, the conformance
Okay.
to the neighborhood. I also thought you were saying that the rule like Half Moon Bays would discourage the construction of affordable homes.
Not affordable, but I think moderate priced houses, because if you have a lot, for example, a smaller lot, and you're going to build a 900 square foot home, I think that a builder would most likely build a 1,200 square foot home, but 900, you're getting awfully small.
Do you think it might
including
not
the
build
garage.
at all, or
Right.
might want to merge it, explore a merger, and then you'd end up with a less affordable home? At least that's what you're thinking, is that, am I doing justice to it? I
On
just
these
wanna be-
particular lots, you can't merge at all. There's a
Okay.
reason that they
Well, I
can't
mean,
be-
unless a neighbor buys it, but I mean, yeah, okay.
Right.
So what you're saying is if you have a little bit larger home, you're thinking is it'll still be somewhat moderate priced and provide for a need that the smaller home wouldn't, because it would just be so much smaller. Is that,
Right, because there are areas on particular blocks where the area may be 5,000 square feet, but where
Right.
3 lots were combined, so you have 7,500 square feet. So that person has decided perhaps to build 50% of
Right.
the 7,500 or whatever the amount is. But, and I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry if I've contributed to that, I apologize, but I just wanted to be sure that I understand. I think I
Right,
understand the
but I
point you're
might
making.
have something like a 4,500 square foot lot, and under the county, next to that 7,500 square foot lot, at least under the county, you could build approximately 2,000 square foot lot that might be comparable to the one next door.
understand.
And fit in the neighborhood,
I
as
cer-
opposed to Half Moon Bay, which might be
Right.
greatly reduced.
Well, I certainly understand your point about being consistent with the other houses that are there. That certainly stands to reason. So
Mainly
thank
from the
you.
perspective of the people that are already living there.
Sure.
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you kindly. Lenny, I'm going to ask you forbearance for about 4 minutes. I've received a request for a slight break. So if that's all right, we're going to take a 4-minute break. We'll be back at 3:25.
Also, who is speaking for Committee for Green Foothills, I have a sort of an additional point to make besides all the work that she has been doing on the Mid-Coast LCP review. And this goes back to some issues that are still troublesome issues that didn't somehow inadvertently didn't get included in the LCP review for the Mid-Coast. There are in the Mid-Coast a lot of a significant number of lots that are subdivided lots that are in either hazard areas or sensitive habitat areas. The map that I have shown, I'm showing here is the Seal Cove area. And if you look at the, that white area is Ocean Boulevard, and the beach and the ocean is to the bottom of that. Between Ocean Boulevard and the ocean beach itself, there are cliffs, and in this study was done in 1980. It was done by Bill Cotton and Associates, and it studied the geologic hazards there. So between Ocean Boulevard and the ocean in 1980, there were 3 houses in that general area between. Those 3 houses are no longer there. They've been removed because it was too hazardous for them to be there. The cliff erosion and cliff collapse has undoubtedly moved that cliff face back very close to Ocean Boulevard now. So we have these parcels, though, that are owned by people that are either part of the cliff or part of the ocean, and they are not buildable. The county would say everything is buildable theoretically, but I don't know how this could possibly be approved. And so this is an area that is quite troubling because there really is a need to deal with it in a manner that would eliminate those parcels from the potential for even attempting to be built. And I think I would like to ask you to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they develop a plan, and this could be done, there could be funding found through, say, the Coastal Conservancy, which assists with this kind of problem, to buy these parcels and retire them from development potential. In this area along Seal Cove, I counted 55 parcels just looking at this map. So that's a significant number. And the other place I just have a graphic to show you is in a place called the Montecito Riparian Corridor, which is up behind El Granada. And it has a significant area of wetlands and a little stream that goes through there. And again, there's a lot of already subdivided lots that are covered by this riparian area. The hatched area, and then the little darker band around it is the riparian area with a 30-foot buffer zone around it. And there's 17 parcels that were identified in there. So that's another area where it would be very good public policy to address this proactively. No development has been proposed on those lots as of yet, but I'm sure it will happen in the future. And then the last area where I'm aware of some of these lots that are pre-existing lots and nature has taken over is in the ocean edge at Princeton Harbor. There's a number of those lots that are actually underwater there, under the ocean. So there's another area where theoretically the county would say, theoretically these are developable because they're already subdivided existing parcels, but as a matter of policy conformance with the LCP and other policies, I don't think they are. And I think it would be the fairest thing to do to develop a program to acquire those. So I would just ask that your commission consider recommending to the board that they institute a program to deal with those 3 areas. And any others, I'm not, there may be some other areas as well where you have existing subdivided lots that are totally covered with either a wetland or they're a very steep cliff, something that makes them impossible.
Just through
One
the...
moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
I think, Ralph, you had something. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lenny, if these lots, particularly say the cliffront lots, are unbuildable, why is it in the public interest to
acquire them?
spend public money to acquire them?
There will always be some creative person that will come to the. I don't know. I have. I think it is certainly a fairer way to go to. The price would not be high, I would imagine, to acquire them. I just think it is in the public interest not to have this potential conflict between somebody's expectation that comes in, makes an application, has to go, is run through a large number of studies, finds a way, like in San Francisco where they have actually built on cliff faces, to put down caissons and so forth that would protect a new structure, then to be told, well, you can't do that because our coastal plan doesn't allow that. It just creates a very major a dissonance between what somebody thinks they can do and tries to pursue and what the county requirements are. It puts a lot of pressure on the county to come up with some creative way to allow somebody to do something. I just think to acquire those parcels or to have the ability to do it if somebody is willing to sell is a better, I wouldn't say they should be condemned, but they should be allowed the opportunity to sell it for protection. In the case of Seal Cove, this is an area that is identified as high geologic hazard by the county's own mapping. And it's also adjacent to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, which is owned by the county. So it would make double good sense to acquire that and protect it.
I guess I would have less trouble with the concept provided the price that was paid reflected the fact that the lots have no use.
Are near worthless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be you certainly wouldn't want to pay some fabulous price for it. It would not be a fair thing
Go ahead,
either.
please.
Yeah, it would strike me that it's, one of the first things to do is be sure that indeed policies are in place, especially where it's definitely not just a matter of, I'm thinking with the basic zoning powers under public health, safety, and welfare.
Right.
And particularly where it's health and safety, building in a geologically unsound area, that just the policies just simply do not allow that. So it's something that wouldn't even be entertained. But still, to clean up the books, and perhaps even a program that encourages people to donate it might have some value as parkland, and at least there'd be some tax benefit for doing that.
It could also be donated, for sure, right.
And so to investigate a program that would encourage donations for tax benefit and minimal purchase price,
Right.
Just to clean things up, there might be some value in that. But I think, and it's not clear to me that if there are cases where simply it would be highly undesirable to have someone build, but geologically the lot might be buildable, and again, if this is land where just for the public welfare we'd like to keep it open, well then that should be investigated. But it's not clear to me that the riparian area, that's something that actually under current policies building just wouldn't be allowed. Or would someone be able to say, well, I've got at least a right to one unit, and or it hasn't been fought out.
It hasn't been tested yet. I know that planning will be sorely tested if somebody does come in to propose a development on there. Although there was a case in the mid-coast urban area where somebody proposed to build over a creek, and the county did allow that, right over a creek.
Right. I think I was on the commission when that happened.
I think it was.
I thought there was one there, but that happened when I was on the commission. But maybe
there was one. It was maybe 15 years ago that did get approved. The creek went into a culvert, and the house is on top of the creek. I just don't like that. That is an example also of really a potential problem in the long term.
Well, and that is a case where if there either policies need to be in place, if we would be on sound planning and legal ground to say building isn't allowed, look at that question. Or if we're not quite sure we're on sound ground completely on that, well then a somewhat higher purchase, it may be in the public interest to really look at acquiring that, and for land that is has a little more economic value than zero.
True.
But not the same value that an unencumbered lot would have.
The Seal Cove area is particularly instructive because there actually were 3 houses there that had to be removed because they were breaking apart and about to go down the cliff. So they did get removed by the county a number of years ago. So it just does not make sense to entertain putting additional houses in a place where other houses had to come down. And obviously the question is the land worth anything at all? Or would the county actually deny development on these parcels? I've had long discussions with various people in county planning, and the former county geologist who said, well, you can just build anywhere if you engineer it right. So he doesn't work for the county anymore, but I didn't really like that
Good.
statement.
What were his initials, Murray Levitch? Seriously?
Yeah, it was Al Neufeld, right?
Oh, okay. It
Thank
sounded
you.
like something Murray would have said,
Michael,
for a price.
you knew immediately, didn't you?
I mean, engineers, you know, if you can find the money, you can pretty much design anything.
Thank you, Lenny. George, help me out here. If you are building on a precipitous slope, oceanside, don't you need a geologist to okay the plans? So therefore, we'd save a lot of county money by, I hate to reduce take away the concept of caveat emptor, an assumption of risk. It seems that we're the state or the county is doing everything for everybody, but a geologist is required. So
Oh,
therefore,
absolutely.
It's of no moment. Now, as far as in the riparian area, that I can't answer to. That would be disgraceful to be able to.
I think Ms. Roberts' concern was if a geologist was able to devise a way that would meet the accepted tests and standards and professional conventions for building a stable house, would the county be obliged to approve it because it met all of its requirements, even though maybe common sense would say you don't put a house on a crumbling cliff? And I think that's her concern. Yeah,
I realize it.
Yeah, and we have very strict geologic requirements, and yes, it would be very, very intense scrutiny. However, I think Lenny's concern is maybe someone would come up with something that meets that test based on today's knowledge of
Well,
building
as a
practice.
As a fellow commissioner said, if you have enough money and the right engineer, there's no problem.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that in practical terms that would be, there are geologic situations that there's no sensible way to engineer around, but a deep-moving landslide that's hundreds of feet deep, for instance, but still that doesn't mean someone won't try, and while we in an ivory tower here or behind the ivory dais talk about what geologists would approve and not, geologists are only people. And as a matter of fact, there was a geologist, and I have no fear in saying this publicly, Murray Levitch, who was worthy of being disbarred and was about to be disbarred by the state board that regulates geologists, and he voluntarily accepted retirement rather than face the equivalent of being defrocked. And Murray went around pronouncing many things developable, and there are houses that have since slid down hills or broken apart that he said were going to be fine. So those, to the extent that and I have no fear of being sued for libel for what I just said because it's completely true. And the fact is that to the extent we can remove those risks up front, because it only takes one person to make an incompetent decision one time to have something built in a hazard area, maybe there is at least minimal value if the land can be bought at a low price, since it's near zero value to any knowledgeable owner at this point. But
Thank you, Commissioner. Leonard Warren, followed by April Vargas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Afternoon, Leonard.
Am I too close to this?
I don't think so. We'll yell.
I have one page of notes, and I hope I can get through it all in 5 minutes, and I hope that maybe I can get a little indulgence.
It's a challenge.
I think I need to start out by pointing out that the issue isn't how many lots, how many parcels, or how many houses. The issue is how many people can the coastside area support. And it's my firm belief that the original LCP was approved by the Coastal Commission in 1980 based on the number of people that the land use plan said will be there at build-out. So this whole concept of saying, well, we guessed wrong, now we have to recompute the build-out and make it higher, that is fundamentally flawed approach. You can use the recomputation only to decide you now have to change the land use to keep that build-out population no higher. And in reality, if you look at the situation now, the population really needs, the maximum population really needs to be lower than what was anticipated in 1980. We're finding out that even the 1980 population is unworkable. And so just saying, well, we were wrong, here's the new build-out number, that's not acceptable. And this is the feeling of most of the people who live on the coast side and don't own vacant property. The proportionality rule is very important in terms of keeping houses small, so that if you have a retired person, single person, they have an affordable house to live in. I have a standard size lot, 5,000 square feet. The house is under 1,400 square feet, not counting the garage. And so to say that on a 2,500 foot lot, you can build a 1,200 to 1,400 square foot house, this is ridiculous. I could sell my house now for probably $550,000. If you allow a 1,200 square foot house to be built on a half-size lot, today it's going to sell for $450,000. That is not affordable. The proportionality rule is critical to a whole bunch of the things that have been discussed today, and I think that I strongly urge you to include that as an integral part of the final package that you put together. It incentivizes merger. It also provides for smaller houses when merger is not practical. It incents owners of adjacent parcels that aren't in common ownership to talk to each other, because some of these people, even though they're family members, will not even discuss it with anybody else. They are insistent that they're going to build their full-size house on their half-size lot. Another thing that hasn't been addressed, and I believe that even though staff may have been bound by the scoping sessions, your commission is not. This is an LCP update. That means you have to modernize the LCP. And so one of the points there is, why should the coast side have the highest floor area ratio of any place on the peninsula? The floor area ratios need to be reduced to be no higher than they are in the rest of the peninsula. That means the 53% has to go. We come down to 50% after you include the garage, not before. In Miramar, with the 10,000 square foot zoning district, I've talked to Fran Pollard. She was unable to make it here today, but she's one of the people that put a huge effort into the Montero Moss Beach El Granada Community Plan in late 70s. And the intent of the large zoning in Miramar was to protect the environmental resources and to keep the openness of the area. But what's instead happened over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years is people have decided, well, with the large parcels, they can build monster houses there. The houses there shouldn't be very much bigger than they are in the 5,000 square foot zoning district, because Miramar is a very sensitive area. So in the S94 district, which is what S9 turned into about 3 years ago, I think you need to reduce the maximum FAR in S94 to about 35% at the most. That'll still allow for larger houses than in the 5,000 square foot district, but there will be space between them, and it'll maintain some of the openness, and the builders won't cut down every single tree for every single house, which is the case right now. They start out, they level the lot down to bare dirt with nothing on it, and then they build a house, and that wasn't the intent of the 10,000 square foot zoning. If you look around El Granada, there's still a very large number of the original cottages, which is what was intended on a 2,500 square foot lot. Can I please have
Leonard,
more time?
short amount.
All right, let me scan down here and see if I can pick out what the most important things are.
I thought you were going to ask to finish your sentence.
Well, I could have asked if
A number of speakers didn't use their time, so I'm really asking for some indulgence, because I do have a lot of material.
I don't mean to belabor.
we're gonna-
You better hurry up and finish.
Please hurry up. We'll give you another minute, and then I'm being very, very lenient. You're always over time. That's
Okay,
why.
As far as the authority to merge above 5,000 square feet, you might ask council what part of that they don't understand. This is directly off of
We'll take care of
the
that.
state website. The use permit requirement, I think, should be for less than 80% of zoning, not that hard 3,500-foot number. And as far as what Ann Carey said about houses on substandard lots fitting in with the community, a 1,500 square foot house on a 2,500 square foot lot next to a 1,500 square foot house on a 5,000 square foot lot does not fit in with the community. It's half the land it needs to be, half the house. Finally, you have heard before that the zoning has to be adjusted to meet the land use plan, not the other way around. So recomputing the build-out, you're essentially making the land use plan match the zoning, and state law says you can't do that. And by the way, and as far as the merger, this case down
Leonard,
here.
this is an awful long minute.
Okay, this will be my last point then.
Please.
There is a parcel that I can drive you over to in El Granada with this configuration, less than 10,000 square feet, where there was a house in the center on approximately a 5,000 square foot lot. In 1997, Terry Burns approved lot line adjustments on each side to reduce the center parcel to way less than 5,000 square feet in order to allow a house to be built on each side there. So a place where legally they could only build one house, there are now three. So the merger program, as it's implemented by staff, doesn't work. Staff actually tells the applicants right now, and I can tell you about specific parcels, they tell the applicants how to circumvent the merger requirement.
Thank you, Leonard.
Would you like this?
Yes,
I
we
do
can
have
make-
one I'm going to take a risk if I can, and through the chair, ask one question of Leonard, because I want to
Please
be
do.
sure I understand. And Leonard, I appreciate your good nature in putting up with my gentle teasing, which is meant in a friendly spirit. But what I wanted to ask, obviously, what you're telling us, I think, is useful. And certainly, we'll crank it into our considerations. But when there are past mistakes that are made that are where the horse is well out of the barn. To keep the horses that haven't already escaped in the barn, do you think that do you have any problem with the merger when George Bergman outlined merger priorities? Do you have any specific problem with that, other than I'm gathering you would prefer, assuming it's true, that applicants have been advised on how to circumvent the merger requirements? That other than that, do you have any problem if we go ahead, if we were, and I'm just saying this hypothetically because we haven't concluded the hearing or our deliberations, with the type of program that George Bergman recommended?
Let's see, that's, which one of these?
To right now merge the lots that are in the top two classifications on and then get to the third one as resources provide, or as a house would be demolished or rebuilt or expanded.
You're asking about that
Yes.
sheet there?
Yes.
I think very clearly the top one absolutely has to be done yesterday. I think the center one needs to be done today, and I've already pointed out the problem with delaying the third situation. If you were, and this is not within your power, but if it was to be a fireable offense for county staff to tell an applicant how to circumvent the merger requirements, then I would say, yes, you can delay some of these things.
Well,
you also have to watch out for lot line adjustment abuses.
Right. Now, it does strike me, if someone were to know they're in that third category, if they were to know, well, gee, my house is only astride two of these lots and I've got this other one here, we'll just put that in the son's name, and then they're able to, if we wait, more of that may happen.
And in fact, it is happening about 4 blocks down the street from me. Staff advised an applicant who came in to build on a 3,400 square foot parcel next to a parcel they own. Staff advised them, if we accept this application, you're going to be required to merge, and then staff told them how to adjust, quote, this is what I was told, how to, quote, adjust the ownership to get around the merger requirement.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question, Leonard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. April Vargas, we're going to have to call a halt to change tapes at 3:57, so you should have an ample time, and if you don't, we'll adjust somehow, some way.
Well, thank you
And
kindly.
you're going to be followed by Christina Lee.
Okay, my name is April Vargas. I'm a Montero resident, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Committee for Green Foothills. I'll just go through the tasks one by one. Task 1, the Committee for Green Foothills concurs with the detailed analysis of the residential build-out numbers prepared by the MCC, and we're particularly concerned about the potential 11% increase in units and population that could occur without an effective merger policy. So we do support the merger policy that SAF has submitted. We also concur with the 5 recommendations presented by the Midcoast Community Council. And in particular, we recommend that the county approves no new subdivisions without adequate mitigations for the effects that more parcels and more subdivisions would bring. A possible mitigation could be to include a requirement that if a subdivision were approved, that existing undeveloped and buildable lots in equal number to the new lots created by the subdivision would have to be retired. So in other words, you would get a no net gain in developed parcels, developable parcels. There actually is this precedent for this. The Coastal Commission required this of the city of Half Moon Bay as a condition of approval of the Pacific Ridge development. I don't have the exact year, but I believe it was within the last 2 years. So actually the preference is no new subdivisions at all, but should they be required, steps have to be taken so that more buildable lots aren't required. Task number 2, of course, I concur with the comments that Lenny Roberts made. In addition, I just had a brain. We recommend the MCC's 3 points. On this task, we believe that the Commission needs to go beyond the staff's relatively passive recommendation to accept the figures and to institute policies that will keep the build-out numbers from being unwittingly exceeded through a lack of clear and consistent regulations. So the Midcoast Communities Council does have 3 specific suggestions that we do concur with. Finally, on task 5, we do share the concerns of the Midcoast Council regarding the potential increase in the build-out numbers, as I had said before, absent a merger policy. And we do urge mergers in zoning districts where the minimum parcel size is in excess of 5,000 square feet. And we appreciate the fact, as George reported, that County Council is looking into this. But for a variety of reasons, as was stated, even if the net gain, or in this case the net loss, would be, say, less than 5 lots, we still think to have consistency and for the public to understand the meaning of a minimum parcel size, that it would be good and consistent for this to be pursued. So I'm sorry I was a little bit rough in my presentation, but thank you.
Thank you so very kindly. I think because of technical difficulties there, we have to change a tape, and I was told it will take approximately 5 minutes, and therefore we shall take advantage of those 5 minutes by having a 5-minute recess. Technology. We're ready to go. Christina Lee, you have great patience. Thank you so kindly.
You're very
Paul
welcome.
Perkovic, you're next.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to start actually my comments with Task 2, which has to do with affordable housing incentive option. I know that the details have not been fully thought out. However, when looking at it, just at initial glance, it says that for market rate homes, there should be a disincentive to, I think it was 0.39 floor area ratio. We don't believe that there should be a disincentive. For the market rate housing, it should be at current county standards, which is at 0.49, or is it 0.5?
What is it, George?
Point 0.48 for non-conforming parcels,
Thank you.
0.53 for conforming parcels.
So 0.48 should be the floor area ratio at the current county level for market rate units. Now, for affordable units, we agree that it should have some sort of incentive, especially in this day and age where there's a lack of affordable housing and many people are scrambling to find places to live at a reasonable price. Moving on to task 3, which talks about mergers, we don't believe that...
That's task 5.
Task 5.
Task 5, I'm sorry, task 5. We don't believe that... Excuse me. We don't believe that lots should be merged or forced to merge. While I understand staff's concern with extra work, that shouldn't be a reason to make a property owner lose their parcel. There are people that, you know, have their parcels, they've owned it for a long time, and they may want to pass it on to their children. What if they have 3 children and they have 3 substandard lots? If they're forced to merge it, they'll never be able to divide it, and they'll only be able to give it to one child. I mean, that's just one example that could happen, but people shouldn't be forced to merge their lots. And, you know, with substandard lots, they are actually ideal sites for affordable housing. When you look at land costs or development costs, you look at it and they are, most of the cost these days is just the cost of the land, not even the cost of the home. And given that, you would think that if a substandard lot is substandard in that sense, they would be lower in price. And so in the development of it, in the acquisition of the land, the total cost for the building of it would be less. And so they would be better sites for affordable housing. And also, if they were substandard and if you had mechanisms for them to merge if they so wanted, people could merge more than one substandard lot over time and build one bigger affordable housing project. Now, going back to task 1, which has to do with the residential build-out numbers. The way that the build-out numbers are calculated from staff's report, it assumes that substandard lots, contiguous and common ownership are already merged in the calculation of it. That is, I think, jumping a step forward, because when you do that, you're assuming that you have already accepted with task 5 that you're going to merge these lots, which hasn't been determined yet. So when you're doing task 1, you should consider that those lots should be separate, counted separately. Those substandard lots should be counted separately, and so the build-out numbers might even need to be adjusted further higher. And also, in terms of second units and caretaker units, they were included in the build-out count. But again, in this day and age of not a lack of affordable housing, we do need more of those kinds of units, and they should not be included when counting the build-out numbers. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so very kindly. I'm just going to revise this and say, Chep Kozak, it's yours, if you so desire.
No, I was going to go.
That'll be the day. We wouldn't want you to do that.
Thank you. Chuck Kozak from Montera, member of the Mid-Coast Community Council, speaking for the council. I wanted to clarify some of the points that were communicated earlier about the council's positions. And I'll just kind of go through it as I have the notes here that I've collected them. On task 1, George and his staff did do a really great job of really going through and finding every little parcel and every possible conceivable merger that was mentioned, and he presented those all to us very clearly, very thoroughly in public meetings, and made it very clear that was the situation. What I want to point out about these figures that we came up with, so we agree with the count they came up with. The county had been operating under the idea that build-out was going to be somewhere in the area of 6,200 residential units. And this was based on an earlier sort of combination of some sampling and some estimation. This newer number that we're looking at now of 67 something is an increase of roughly 9% over that. Without the merger of the substandard lots that George is recommending, that's another increase of 11% over that. So we're looking at, just from this exercise, we've discovered that we're looking at 20%, more than 20% of the residential units than what we thought we were going to have. Which just brings me back to the point that I've been making at every one of these meetings, that this needs to be, of course, part of a much more comprehensive look at what is the actual carrying capacity, what is the capacity for the coast side for residential development before we start having a detrimental effect on the coastal resources that this plan is supposed to be helping us to protect. Which leads me actually to what Lenny had been talking about earlier. When you start looking at any way you can to start reducing these numbers without having, depriving people of the rights of their property or whatever like that, and she's talking about a program of maybe acquiring some of these parcels that can't be built on. And one of the things I wanted to point out, specifically those three areas that she brought up, the ones on Ocean Avenue and Moss Beach they're adjacent to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, and so they're actual prime parcels that the county could work to acquire, probably in partnership with other agencies like State Parks and the Coastal Conservancy to help fund for that, because those would actually be, by protecting those cliffs, you're actually protecting the marine habitat that's already there, that's at the bottom of those cliffs. The Montecito riparian area is adjacent to what's probably going to be part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area within the next few years. And so that's a very, again, that's a very good area, the county can look at for retiring areas. The lots in Princeton are adjacent to Pillar Point Marsh. And there's also projects that the Harbor District and the Army Corps of Engineers are looking, to do in the harbor that might be able to use the rights of, that area of that property in terms of development for Princeton. So there's a lot of possibilities out here in terms of what can be looked at. So to relating this to Task 5 and the merger, one point I want to make is that the density of neighborhoods, aside, from the overall impact, of course, of how many people, how many cars, how much sewage, how much water, how much electricity, how many parks, how many schools, that we would need for the people in the coast side, there's also a micro impact on the individual neighborhoods, where if you have where if you start developing on 25-foot wide lots, for instance, you start getting neighborhoods that are very much like San Francisco. You start losing street parking. You have people are a lot closer together. You start, having a very significant effect on the whole character of the Mid-Coast community, something that we've, of course, been spending a lot of time talking about as part of this process. The affordable housing, the use of the lots for affordable housing, there's been an ongoing discussion about that for years. The workshops for this update project, as they came up, weren't really conducive to discussion of it. George came up with a couple of proposals. People came up with some alternatives to it. There wasn't really time to kind of let that develop a little bit so we can come up with something. But there are some possibilities there, certainly. And but our council has always taken the position that it's better to keep the disincentive to develop the smaller lots, and if you give that the development should be encouraged toward the smaller houses that were originally there, because we still have a lot of those in the community. There's still quite a component of our community, so you can't really say that they would be out of character with the rest of the neighborhoods, because we still have a lot of these smaller houses, a lot of them sitting on much larger lots too. You would also, things like the proportionality rule would also Again, we don't have the market analysis to back these things up. These are things we need to look at in part of a bigger plan. This might be part of the incentive for people to buy, these individual lots that are next to them because maybe they want to expand their house. And so that would, they can buy another 2,500 square foot lot that's next to them, expand their lot to 7,500 square feet. That gives them room to expand their existing house if they need to. Using these lots for affordable housing is going to take a lot of work between the community, between the development community, between some of the nonprofits, and between the county to come up with a good program so we can come up with something like they have in East Palo Alto.
I'm sorry, City of Palo Alto.
Okay. The City of Palo Alto, where we would be able to retain these and encourage this process happen and make it workable, for the owners of those properties and for the people who will be living in those houses. So that's something I think that needs a lot more work. And what I think would be dangerous would be to come up with policies that would eliminate, those options. Because as we saw when we were looking at the Moss Beach Highlands project, we've got 2 other affordable housing sites that really have a very, very, very slim chance of ever getting developed. And affordable housing is really becoming a real concern and a real need on the coast side, as you've seen with the efforts for the El Granada Mobile Home Park, in order to keep that as an affordable housing site as well. So that's an important issue, and we wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to be able to use, the infill option for this.
You can't afford long pauses.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just running through my notes here.
We don't like to discourage thoughtfulness, however, but still.
Those are basically the points I had to make. No, that was it. I can just leave it at that.
Thank you, Chuck.
Because everyone else has made the other points for me.
Because
So.
Paul Perkovic granted you those extra couple of minutes from his time.
Yeah.
So I know that, thank you, Paul. I know.
Right, plus he'll be doing cleanup of anything I miss, so thank you.
That is true, is it not, Paul? I don't know. I wouldn't hold you that. Judy Taylor, you're going to be follow Paul. No, you follow Paul.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Paul Perkovic. I live in Montera. I am chair of the Midcoast Community Council currently, but Chuck had done a lot of the analysis and write-up for our recommendations there, which is why he was the designated presenter for the council positions. And I'm also on the Montera Water and Sanitary District. And George has been very, very helpful over the last year or so in forming a data working group. He's gone through the methodology used for the counts. We didn't verify on a parcel-by-parcel basis that he did everything exactly correctly and check his arithmetic, but we have very high confidence that he was conscientious on that. But we've also been looking, and you'll be discussing this at a future meeting, in fact, 2 weeks from today, on some of the infrastructure requirements, and in particular water. And there's considerable concern that adequate supplies of local water to serve the population on the mid-coast may be problematic, certainly in our Montera Moss Beach district. I started off with 1 page of notes, which I had hoped to get through in 5 minutes, and I actually wanted to just follow up on what a number of other speakers had said. First of all, to Lenny Roberts' issue about the lots along the bluff top, I believe it was the county that approved the homes that were built in the North County area before the city of Pacifica was incorporated, and which fell into the ocean during a storm a couple of years ago. Typically what happens in a situation like that is the property owner looks to the city or county or state or federal government for some kind of financial compensation. So it's not free when you approve a development, regardless of what the geological reports are, to the taxpayer. The taxpayer eventually, in most cases, is on the hook for that. And I wish we could have private insurance be responsible for people who build in hazard areas, hurricane, flood, bluff-top erosion hazardous areas. Secondly, also with regard to Lenny's point, some years ago when I checked with staff, and they don't remember how long it was, probably in the 1970s, the county acquired some parcels at the north end of the runway at the Half Moon Bay Airport. When you looked at the airport overlay, we were looking at the Princeton end, and we were not looking at the end in Moss Beach. And that's because I believe when the county did the study for airport safety at that time, they determined that the most effective way to deal with that issue was simply to acquire those parcels. Third, there was a speaker who suggested that the staff report should have projected based on using no lot mergers, and I've done that for you. According to the 1980 local coastal program, George just told me at a break, one of the tables that's not in the policies booklet said that there was a build out of 6,200 units, and when you look at the table 2.3 and 2.4, which are water or sewage generation based on population, that was based on an estimated build out population of 16,025. If you take George's numbers, the 6733, and add in what happens if you do not do the lot merger program, and if every substandard lot were to eventually be developed, you end up with 9,158 units and a population based on 2000 census data extrapolated to 25,640. That's well over 50% higher than the carrying capacity that passed the environmental review when the LCP was certified in 1980. So I think it's very clear that nobody wanted to see that sticker shock. If you had seen that, if that's the way the data had been presented to you, I think you would have been aghast and would have said, we've got to do something about it. By presenting the data in the other direction, I don't think it became quite as obvious where the problem is. My original notes were going to start with George's numbers and indicate that by the recalculation and the growth in average household size, we already are seeing a 17.6% increase in the estimated build-out population. And then if you don't merge the vacant substandard lots, that's almost 12% more increase. And if the developed but unmerged substandard lots, the ones that we've put as sort of low priority, were to be split off into separate ownership, there's a potential for another 1,690 units or another 27% increase in population. So each of these things add up. And then one thing that's lurking off for December 10th, your meeting on residential units and non-residential zoning districts, is the potential for residential units in commercial and commercial coastside recreation and waterfront districts. I don't know, George, whether you included in your count there, you had 495 as the potential with 99 counted, whether that included the caretaker units in Princeton that exist or their proposal from the Princeton Citizens Advisory Committee, which was let everyone have a caretaker unit, which would increase that number even further.
Through the chair, to
Please,
respond,
George.
for consistent methodology, the number that's reflected in the chart is the proposal, is the number of caretaker quarters that would be allowed if the proposal that staff is recommending were to be enacted, much like the assumption of merging lots for the count in build-out. If one notices in the recommendation 1B, I'm asking your commission to direct staff to adjust the data to reflect ultimate policy changes that are adopted by the Board of Supervisors, vis-a-vis if the Board of Supervisors either does not endorse a merger program or the other way around does endorse a merger program that merges up to larger minimum parcel sizes. My recommendation is that we then revise the data based on the proposal. And the same thing would be with the ultimate outcome with caretaker quarters. Whatever the ultimate outcome is, then we would revise the number accordingly.
Okay.
Great,
But
thank you.
but my concern is if all these things don't happen, according to the recommendations that George has come up with, there's a potential for a very, very vast increase. And one final point, if I may, on the affordable housing issue. One of the speakers said, if you reduce the house size on a small, isolated, substandard lot that is between a couple of larger homes, it's not going to fit into the character of the community. I thought that was an ironic argument to make because very often what we hear before the Planning Commission is a dispute of the argument presented by the community that if you put a large house in the midst of smaller houses, that's not consistent with the community. And so that argument should go both ways. And if you're, and we haven't been very successful in preventing the very large houses in a community that has mostly modest homes. And so I don't want to see it applied in the inverse direction so cavalierly. Okay? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
sir. Very
indulgence.
perceptive. We've been very good in regards to large houses, I thought, have we not, as a commission?
Eventually. It took a while.
Thank you so much. Judy Taylor, please.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry for being late. I haven't heard what most everybody else has said, so if I'm repeating anything, please forgive me. A number of quick notes that I've made here. One of the first things that I would request is that there be a clear definition of what the build-out numbers is. Is it an estimate where there's going to be some fluctuation back and forth, or is it a hard and fast number? If it's a hard and fast number and a 50-foot lot gets absorbed by 2 adjacent property owners, does that create another unit someplace else, or does that unit evaporate? We keep hearing over and over again about if this happens, it's going to increase build-out numbers, and then we bring up, yes, but they've been reduced because of these mergers over here. Well, that doesn't count. So we need a real clarification on that point. As to affordable, or the non-conforming lots, a couple of points there. The people that own these properties have a constitutional right to use their properties, and there's a lot of latitude in how far the county goes in regulating that use without crossing the line to a taking. But if you tell people they can't build on them, then it does become a taking, and that needs to be recognized, that these people do have a right to use the properties. I can't tell you the number of conversations I have with people where they're saying, what do you mean I can't do X, Y, and Z? So that also needs to be kept in mind. I know that there has been talk about if you're going to develop a non-conforming lot that you need to buy a conforming lot someplace else. That defeats the entire purpose of doing any kind of affordable program. And just for the record, affordability is a joke on the coast side. We had a house on tour yesterday morning. It's about 800 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 1-car garage. It's about 40 years old, and it's listed for $479,000. And this is not one that can be torn down and a bigger house created. I would have some real serious reservations about a complicated bureaucratic process for doing affordable. The fact that these houses are small and they're going to be on small lots is going to limit the buyers of those houses, and so there's going to be an inherent affordability that is going to be built into this over time. Not as much as would happen with the bureaucratic process, but the bureaucratic processes are bureaucratic, and I would take a real long look at how far you folks want to get involved in that. Several years ago, I was in front of you folks fighting for a good friend of mine, Linda Banks, who was trying to build a home at 910 Ventura on a 25 by 120-foot lot in El Granada. Got appealed all the way to the Coastal Commission, went to court, and she was eventually successful in obtaining a building permit. She's going to be moving into that house on Monday. The lot was purchased in 1997. You want to talk about disincentives for building on non-conforming lots? It's there. I mean, you guys don't have to go any further than that. By the same token, I have to tell you, the people that walk into this house, it's an 1,100 square foot single-story house, single-car garage. The people that walk into it go, wow, this is really cool. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath with a den. She doesn't have neighbors upstairs. She doesn't have neighbors on the side. She can do a little bit of gardening, and it's way better than renting. I'm renting now for the first time in about 14 years, and I got a pink bathtub. I hate the pink bathtub. And most of the people in our community are relegated, if they don't have the ability to buy a $600,000 house, they're relegated to being perpetual tenants. And the sense of rootedness in the community is the reason why the government subsidizes ownership through our tax laws. And I really think it's important to keep in mind that we want to keep these people in the community. And unless we start getting creative with ways to do that, it's going to become a community of just rich people. And some people would like to have it Carmel North. I personally wouldn't. That flies in the face of what a lot of people think. I make more money when I sell a $1 million house than when I sell a $400,000 house. But I want my community to have that diversity. A lot of talk happens about the proportionality rule in Half Moon Bay. I've got a deal right now that I'm working on where somebody got a Measure A. It's a 5,600 square foot lot in a 7,500 square foot zoning district. The people on either side are not opposed to a house being built. Neither are in a position to purchase the property. They do, however, object to the fact that both of them are in excess of 2,500 square feet. The house that is going to be built next door is going to be limited to about 1,900 square feet, including the garage. They both think that their property values are going to come down because of this, and I'm expecting that there may be some opposition. I'll talk really fast. I think that's an unfounded fear. However, people have their feelings about these things.
Through the chair, if I might, Judy, I just let the record show that I think it was Paul Perkovich who yielded some of his extra time to you. So don't worry about going a couple minutes over.
Thank you.
But I wanted to, what you were just talking about. I know you went through this, but it went over. My head sometimes is low enough that it went over my head quickly. What is going on, and why are the neighboring property owners afraid that their property values are going to be hurt? If you could just go through
Because they both have houses with living space at 2,500 square feet. This house that's going to be built next in between them.
It'll be because it's smaller. They're worried that it's going to bring down the neighborhood.
Yeah, and like I said, that's an unfounded fear from my perspective.
Right.
But that's how they feel.
I guess I heard you right the first time. I just had a hard time believing. But I guess
both of them have said to me, they're only going to be able to build what? What's that going to do to my property values? We'll go to the Planning Commission and support them being able to build something bigger if they want to go for a variance. And I'm going, there's no way we're going to go anywhere near that one. I don't have any strong feelings about the merger policy, except in the case with the 910 Ventura. It was a unique situation where the lot originally was almost 8,000 feet. There was an encroachment. The neighbors on either side acquired almost 5,000 feet, left the 3,000 square foot lot an orphan. Had they maintained the larger lot size, they could have built a 4,000 square foot house there, and that's what that neighborhood would command. This is one of those things with unintended consequences. I'm not sure that the community is really going to be a lot happier when they go through with these mergers. But like I said, if that's the direction you guys want to go, I'm not going to get heartburn about it. Second units and multifamily, we need to encourage those. That does encourage a higher density use of the existing land, reducing the pressure to go into new areas. And that, I believe, also needs to be taken care of. A couple of other points. Traffic is used frequently. Our roads are at capacity. You want to talk about rewarding bad behavior? Stop growth because traffic is too bad. That is going to guarantee that there is no incentive for people to get out of their cars. I've lived on the coast side for 30 years. The only solutions that have ever been proposed for traffic are more bigger, wider roads and no more houses. And until and unless there is some institutional pressure to create other alternatives, we're going to be locked in this deadlock. And I would appreciate that support from you folks. Paul made a comment about self-insurance. With flood insurance, that is self-insurance. People who are identified in a flood area, in order to get a loan on the property, they have to buy flood insurance. That comes from the federal government. It is a self-insurance program. The staff report says the cost of construction is $125 a square foot. It's closer to $200 a square foot these days. When you're building a smaller house, you still have at least one bathroom. You still have at least one kitchen. You're still going to have to buy a sewer permit. You still have to buy a water permit. The permits fees that we pay you folks are going to be reduced somewhat, but not hugely. In addition to that, when we got 910 Ventura appraised for the construction loan, we had to fight that the appraiser said it's functionally obsolescent because it is too small. Not because it's too narrow, it's too ugly, anything like that. It's 1,100 square feet, it's too small. And again, I'm going to go back to the comment that I made at the last hearing. Do we want consistent or do we want diverse? Do we want compatible or do we want eclectic? We can't have both. Thank you.
Thank you so very kindly. I do not have any further speaker slips.
I would move we close the hearing.
You are very kind. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is now closed. Thank you.
George, you want another bite? Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
members of the commission, what I've done is I'm attempting to put the recommendation on the screen as a starting point for your consideration.
And I know we have it, but Paul, we have your math on that, do we not?
Which I did in the room, so if you check with the calculator, I may have.
Minimally.
I think that's readable. What I put on the screen is actually the blow-up, model
Right.
blow-up of the ivory page.
Right.
So you have that, it's nothing new.
All right, so I would suggest that we just do as we have done previously and take a task at a time. And I think in this particular instance, we can go 1, 2, 3. Hopefully, if you have, or 1, 2, 5. Well, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, and get
1, 2,
5.
3 gets
1, 2, 3 gets us to
picky,
5.
picky. You're right, George.
Well, I personally am in favor of accepting task 1 as presented there. That is, that we accept the estimates that are given, or I guess they're not estimates, they're the actual
Yeah.
numbers.
That's true. And if I understand George correctly, the B section directs the staff to adjust as necessary. That gives us a good command or good control.
Yes, what basically, it's a recognition that when you accept A, there's some built-in part of A includes proposals such as the merging. Should ultimately the Board of Supervisors not accept the merging, I would have to go retool the numbers to take that out. And so B would direct me to go and retool those numbers.
Excellent. Any further?
Well,
Probably.
there were, oops.
All right, let's go through them.
Not connected. I guess there were a number of Mid-Coast Community Council recommendations that are not necessarily there.
On
And
task 1,
Uh,
I didn't think any
Thought
of
they
them,
were in agreement.
I thought they were all in agreement.
maybe I'm reading this wrong. I'm sorry.
I think that Commissioner Baumberger is reading it correctly. Let me draw your attention to,
Page 6.
if you have in your, yes, the staff report, yes. Let's see where-
Thanks.
Page 6, staff report.
Page 11. Staff report.
Oh, yes.
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 As Commissioner Baumberger indicated, the Mid-Coast Community Council's recommendation is item number 3, at the top of the page on page 6.
So, I mean, the first one is, looks at the number of second units to make sure that we don't, count the ones that are actually there and don't add. I guess the basis for my starting point is that I think a number of speakers have made a compelling point that, we potentially have more houses out there than should be for any number of reasons, and that we really ought to do what we can to adjust the land use to match up with capacity in a number of areas. And so these issues where we have, it'll come up again when we talk about merger. I think we're compelled to do what we can to reduce the number of places where people put houses.
Just for what it is worth, we had always seen these 23 tasks, which comprise the Mid-Coast LCP Update Project, as a phase 1. I mean, it's been a 3-year project, but still phase 1. And we looked at
developing the build-out numbers, recalculate them as a baseline based on existing land use policy, existing permitted uses, existing density, and then how the commission or the Board of Supervisors wishes to use this data to change land use policy in terms of what permitted uses will be allowed. Well, we saw that as a phase 2. Right now, what we're asking you to do is to agree that this is a representative count of what is allowed now under current law, and we're not asking you at this time to change land use designations. That we envision that in the future this data could be used as a subsequent project to consider whether is it appropriate to have commercial here? Is it appropriate to have residential here using this data? But we envisioned this data as a enumeration or representation of what's allowed by the existing LCP policy, not the task 1B to change land uses or densities.
What I'm understanding is that this is just accepting this is accurate information by and large.
Well, no.
And that when we get to acting on that information, that's, I mean,
I'll put it this way, it's accurate information based on what is allowed by the certified local coastal program that's in effect today.
Right.
People have called into question the number that we had in the past that was based on that same policy and said, oh, you didn't include this, you didn't include that.
That it was not accurate.
It wasn't accurate. So what this exercise was, the parameters of this exercise, and that's the reason I included it as the assumptions that we made, was to take the land use policy and density limits that are enunciated in the existing certified LCP and determine if everything that's allowed under existing LCP policy were to come to fruition, the planned endpoint of the community, what would we have? And that's what task 1 is.
So task 1 is not meant to be normative. It's not meant to say this is what we think should happen, but just given the current facts, this is a accurate estimate, and we're accepting this just means we're saying, hey, yeah, you got it. It looks like you got it right, and it's accurate.
Yeah, an accurate representation of existing land use policy, and whether your commission, as I think Commissioner Baumberger was suggesting or hinting at, wanted to delve into saying, do we want to change land use policy for whatever reason?
That's not task 1. That's a later task.
Right. That's exactly. I see that as a subsequent effort using that would benefit from the updated information in task 1.
If it's not premature, I would be willing to recommend that we, regarding task 1, that we accept the updated data and also accept the task B or part B identified there, that's something that subsequently may be done.
Well, it's quite true that some of the recommendations relate to policy and perhaps changing land use. I guess I'm a little far away.
No, you're fine.
Well, I couldn't hear the echo, so I moved it closer. It strikes me that in terms of count, what do we have out there and what are we allowed? I mean, determining the number of second units at some time in the near future, I think, is the important piece of data that we're going to need in terms of setting policy.
I would,
and so
yeah.
Their recommendation. We can talk about their recommendations for merger later, which amount to policy. But
no, I would agree that
we ought to do this unit count.
You're right. The point about second units, I'll respond to that. I think that the Mid-Coast Council has raised an important reality that there may and probably are second units that are unpermitted. And I don't want to say illegal because they're allowed by the law, but they didn't come in to get a building permit or a planning approval. Unpermitted second units in the Mid-Coast. And we did not count the unpermitted. I think this is a very valid point, particularly when you think about excessive build-out, and that, as I said earlier in my presentation, you don't want a formal accounting and an informal accounting, whereas build-out will allow 466 units. At some day in the future, we reach the 466 of people who came in and got permits, and then there's still this unspecified non-permitted group out there. I think the Mid-Coast Community Council raises an important point that we need to harmonize those two lists that basically, I say that figuratively, the lists, but basically that all second units out there ideally should be counted, and the way they're counted is when they become permitted. So the next question is, how do they become permitted? And the council said set up a legalization process. I was hoping to have Marcia or Jim Eggemeyer here because that's more their end, which is talking about we have code enforcement staff and using code enforcement, using that branch of the office to maybe aggressively go out and identify violators where there are illegal second units and get them to come in and become legalized. Hence, then they can go into the data pool, and hence we can not exceed build out. So I think it's a very valid point the Mid-Coast Council has raised. I'm not sure what the resource limitations of our department are. However, I think if your commission thinks that we should pursue that, I think it would probably be worthy to make that recommendation, and we will present that recommendation to both Marcia and her staff and determine how to carry it forward so that we identify those that are unpermitted. And Lisa had informed me that some other agencies have amnesty periods so people voluntarily come forward. I'm not sure what one could offer in terms of amnesty because with the new changes in the second unit law, there's no discretionary review. Basically, it's comes in to get a building permit and we'll look at design review. Maybe there'd be a reduction in fees, and then someone may argue you're rewarding someone who avoided it. But anyway, something could be done. I don't want it to only look punitive that we do aggressive code enforcement. Maybe there could be something that'd be done to get people to voluntarily come in. But I think it's a laudable objective, and I concur with you and the council that that we don't want, and I think it's a matter of county policy, we don't want unpermitted uses or entities out there, and that's the reason we have permits and expect people to follow the permits. This harkens a little bit back to the confined animal or horse regulations. Yes, exactly. and so I'm not dismissing it at all. I actually think it's a very good idea. I'm not the one that really can represent the resources we have for code enforcement or legalization, but I think if you think this is a worthy pursuit, include that in your recommendation and we'll see where it goes.
Well, it would certainly seem that if we're accepting this as an accurate estimate, we should at least reference the fact that it's accurate insofar as it includes second units that actually exist, and that we and staff recognize that there are an unknown number of second units that exist that are not included in this number, and that it would obviously be desirable to know what that number is, as well as when we get to the normative parts, it may be desirable to actually get those permitted. But to the extent our baseline data of just having a baseline of accurate data to develop policy on, there is an unknown number greater than zero probably in the scores, maybe into do we have any feeling if it's into three figures or just scores or what?
I wouldn't be able to answer because
right.
I've just
some number greater than zero,
yeah.
but conceivably significant of unpermitted second units.
Right, and I like using the term unpermitted rather than illegal. Right.
Can I do it, Chair? Regarding the second unit, I'm just going to what you said earlier. This number 466 is based on the land use or the zoning that exists now.
That is correct. That is the upper cap. That is the ceiling. That is the limit that we've been certified by the Coastal Commission. It was a percentage of, it was a calculation, a formula, but the end product was that in the Mid-Coast, you cap out at 466 second units.
So is it possible then the second unit that is not counted or that is not permitted is part of this 466?
That's correct, because we didn't know about it, so it wasn't included. So when I'm showing that there are 64 existing second units, and members of the Mid-Coast community are saying maybe it's 164,
That-
maybe
which
it's 200, you know? And so I think this is a worthy course to pursue. I'm not sure the resource limitations, and I feel a little uncomfortable speaking on behalf of Marcia or Jim, but I do think that if this is something the commission wants to pursue, this would be the point to include it in your recommendation.
I'd
That would be my recommendation. There are going to be other things that we say we want to do that are going to run up against resource limitations, and that's in part what our supervisors get to do.
Right.
And,
That's why they earn the big bucks.
That's right.
So, but I think we ought to send them our best thoughts on what we think should be included, and hope that they find resources rather than just.
And we know that
Funny.
merging is going to, if your commission goes forward with the merging, we know that's going to spend resources, but we're willing to take that on, or consider that because of the benefits of merging. So one would see probably benefits in this as well.
So, to the chair, I really don't have a problem with these data. I think it's good, and Commissioner Silver, was that a motion that you make? And
It was, and would it be helpful if I restate it?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
I would move that we accept regarding task 1, that we accept the wording here with the added caveat to point A, that we accept the updated data as an accurate estimate of mid-coast residential build-out based on current available information, but with a recognition that there are an unknown number of unpermitted second units, a number greater than 0, but we do not know how large, that is not included within this, and that perhaps as part of B, or maybe just subsequently C, that we would recommend to the Board of Supervisors that staff be directed to develop a program for identifying that number and ultimately encouraging their legalization and proper permitting.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
On task 2, is there any reason not to accept that? Again, it's a matter of accepting data. I think what we do about the data comes in the next thing. If it's not premature, I would move that we accept the statement regarding task 2, that we accept the updated data as an accurate count of residential zone non-conforming parcels and substandard parcel lots based on the current available information.
Through the chair, just to be
Please, George.
just to be consistent with the approach we took in the first one, I turn your attention to pages 8 and 9 where I've stated the Mid-Coast Community Council recommendation. The first point in the bullet there concurs with the staff recommendation. I believe that the second bullet relates to task 5, and it was I just put it this way, that I think it relates to task 5, and I'm not sure what the third bullet would involve.
But it would seem to me that that's appropriate for discussion under task 5. Again,
that's true.
We're accepting data here. We're not talking about what.
I would say,
in my mind, we're not talking yet about what we do about that data.
I would concur that the second and third bullets are more germane to task 5.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Once again, unanimous. Now, task 5.
Okay, now the fun.
Now the fun begins.
I would like to, you may want to bite this off in 2 parts. The way I structured my presentation, I talked about, and this is embodied in A, the development controls. That would be, and just in a quick top of my head summary, I pointed out that the existing approach is the 5-facet approach with 0.48 parcel size, having daylight plane. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. That is the status quo that staff's recommending. I also introduced the half-moon-based proportionality rule and indicated that the Mid-Coast Community Council endorses that in concert with the the 4 remaining bullets of status quo. And then I also identified the affordable housing incentive. So you may, all of that is to be taken in consideration for 3A, and then 3B and C relate to the whole thing about merging. So what I'm getting at is, you may want to, when we look at 3A, that involves the existing, how we regulate non-conforming parcels. So what you'd be doing is looking at these 3 options. Staff is recommending the status quo. Mid-Coast Council is recommending proportionality rule, otherwise status quo for the remainder. And then there's the affordable housing incentive. All of that relates to 3A, and then 3B and C we'll talk about. With 3B and C we'll talk about afterwards. Those relate to merger.
Go ahead, please, Jim.
Yeah, I certainly, based on what I've heard today, am convinced that the proportionality rule, comparable to what Half Moon Bay is doing, makes a lot of sense. And I, living in a neighborhood myself where house size varies a good deal, the smaller houses within are a pleasant break from the larger ones. And actually, my next door neighbor my lot is 100 feet wide. The next door neighbor has one 50 feet wide. I'm glad her house is not as big as the houses on full-size lots and is significantly smaller. And I think a proportionality rule makes a lot more sense. It also builds in an incentive where non-conforming parcels, substandard parcels, are not in this joint ownership and aren't subject to merger. It certainly increases the incentive from what it would otherwise be for people to voluntarily find a way to swap lots with someone else so that they can merge. I think that makes sense. And also to the extent that it's not possible to merge these parcels and houses that are somewhat smaller are built because of a proportionality rule, all other factors being equal, they're going to be a little bit less expensive. And even though, as Judy Taylor pointed out, boy, an 800 square foot house sold for $475,000, well, that's going to be less than a 1,200 square foot house would sell for. And there's going to be somebody out there that could afford that somewhat smaller house that couldn't afford a bigger one. And generally what we're short of is, what the market tends to build for is the largest house it can for the wealthiest buyer who can manage to afford it. And so at any rate, I think that Half Moon Bay has gotten this right, and we ought to learn from their example.
Commissioner Silver, I agree with you completely.
My goodness.
Well, as most of you know, I like big house. But I do agree with you to extent, John, or Commissioner Silver. We have to try to some way to get these lot merged into a conform lot. And to do that, basically you only allow them to build a house or build a building that it's not going to be marketable for them to either sell or to make money out of it. I was looking at these numbers from Half Moon Bay and also the existing zoning. I tend to willing to agree to go up to the parcel size of 3,500 square feet and stop there, and then for anything past that would go with the existing zoning. Because of the square foot wise, it's not going to be that much different. But I also do like the component part about the affordable option.
I'd like to come back to that at some point.
But to the affordable option that is listed in here, for example, with the 2,500 square foot lot, it's at 1,325 square foot. I would tend to would like to have that lowered to the existing zoning, which would be 1,200 square foot. That way, I just thought it just makes it easier on the affordable housing option that you change that into, or have that in the existing zoning number, and then the market rate option would be using basically maybe the Half Moon Bay maximum floor area. So, sound confusing, I think, if everybody got that.
It might help if George could put up the chart that showed the proposal for the affordable option.
This one, yeah.
And it looked to me like that, when we looked at it the first time like that, was keyed into the current policy. If we were to go for the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule, would it be appropriate to also tweak what is in this?
I can what I'll do is I'll put the proportionality rule on as well, implication of that, and then we'll go back, or maybe I can put them side by side. Oh, hurry, I could put it side by side.
Not quite fitting that way. Maybe top to bottom.
Well, I'm gonna
Fold the paper, yeah.
I can change the zoom in a second.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'll change the zoom.
Wrong way.
Okay, that seems to get it all.
Got a little bit of the parcel size we're missing there on the far corner.
Well, he's looking up this way, John. That's why.
Oh, I see. That
Yeah,
we got a bigger screen up there. Yeah,
Okay, so
that's all right. That's
okay.
fine.
So basically, let's use the 3,000 again. 3,000 square foot parcel. Oh, sorry. If one had a 3,000 square foot parcel, the existing zoning, the .48, gives you 1,440 square foot house. The jumping over the proportionality rule would give you a 900 square foot house. The affordable housing incentive approach would give you a
1560, right?
1590
1590.
square foot house if you pursued the affordable option. If you chose the market rate option, it'd be 1,170.
It would seem to me and I did want to come back to the affordable because I'm very interested in pursuing that. I think it should be pursued. But the figures that are in this chart for house size on affordability are keyed in to the old or the existing regulations. If we're changing those regulations, it seems to me that the incentives for that would decrease the size of market rate homes or increase the affordable ones should be keyed in to the proportionality rule. Certainly, if the new maximum is a lot less, the market rate option has got to be can't be more than the maximum. The two charts now contradict each other. But I would favor going to the Half Moon Bay style proportionality rule, and then having staff develop an incentive proposal that would mean that a market size house certainly would be no bigger than the maximums allowed. That means there would be no reason to allow it to be bigger than the new lower maximums, or perhaps, I'm not sure it would be reasonable to go below those, but to allow something larger for true affordability. But again, it would have to be part of a program that would mean that those units would remain affordable in perpetuity. And by the way, to the extent one of the speakers brought up, well, bureaucracy would be involved. Certainly communities that have done this do it with a minimum of bureaucracy. And the programs can pay for themselves, and that when the homes are resold, the price can go up a bit, and the housing agency handling this can keep some of that increment. And the price can go up a bit and cover their cost of handling the sale and resale and still keep the unit very affordable.
Could I make a counter argument?
Please do.
I guess I've been wrestling with this, and we have, 2 meetings ago we sat, or 2 weeks ago we sat through a meeting where we looked at the proposal from the Housing Task Force and proposed text and policies in the county's housing element. And my recollection is that it says that there's really not much need in the county for houses that are differentially priced from, $600,000 down to $500,000 or $600,000 down to $450,000. The need is for houses that are far cheaper than that.
Well,
Far cheap. Well,
I'm
I
sorry.
understand. And so, if the county is going to expend resources to meet the real needs, I would propose that we make this a land use decision and make it very clean so it's defendable. To say, we believe there are compelling reasons in terms of what was in mind when the original subdivision was made and infrastructure concerns, to adopt a land use policy that is encouraging of merger as much as we can, and use the low-income housing component that we have in mind as a set of resources to apply to building allowing, which is essentially multifamily alternatives that bring the housing down to where the need is. So remember, the county is telling the state that we are going to meet our affordable housing needs.
This is beyond my ken in terms of the affordable housing needs, and I have a lot to learn, but it seems to me that in terms of affordable housing, there's no way, unless it's subsidized incredibly, of getting low-income housing on individual homes. That's what worries. We're looking at affordable housing here on lots of 3,000, 3,500 with one house. And that's not the way we're going to do, in my mind, from what my knowledge is so far, which is minuscule. I don't understand how we can do that.
Well, just to clarify about, and I realize we're not doing the county housing element here today, but affordable housing is part of what can be considered in the LCP. And in meeting needs for affordable housing, my recollection is there are a number of categories. One is for very low income, and that does mean housing probably cheaper than would be created through a program like this. Then there's for low income, very low, low, and moderate, if I recall the terminology correctly. And you can have a quote-unquote moderately priced house that would be to someone with a moderate income. And that moderate income in this county for a family of four could be $80,000 a year. Given
Actually, that's low.
That's low, yeah.
Okay, it shows how out of date I am. And but
The median income is well over 100.
But for instance, if someone in return for wanting to build a house that is larger than 800 square feet or 825 square feet on a small lot says, gee, yeah, I'm going to live in this, but I will agree that when and if I ever sell it or my estate does, this will be a unit that will be guaranteed to be affordable, and the county identifies it well, given this type of lot, single family, we want that at least be affordable to someone of moderate income. In today's dollars, we might be talking about, what, a unit that would cost $300,000? Is that ballpark correct? Let's say staff, I've seen nods out there, so the record will show that that is correct. And certainly, that's not at all unreasonable to expect that a home of 1,000 square feet, 1,200 square feet, you can certainly upon resale, and even to cover the cost of construction, $300,000 is going to do it. And if again, to get that original buyer, original owner to be willing to commit to that, for whatever, this type of incentive may be adequate, and then sometime down the road, there would be an individual unit that would sell for that price. And communities do in inclusionary zoning requirements and subdivisions end up with single-family homes that are sold as below market rate units. And again, it's not $50,000 or $90,000, but it may be $350,000. But compared to what else is out there, that's a unit that's a part of the housing market that otherwise would not be served. And I think it's worth pursuing, but I think for the purpose of our discussion, I wonder if it would be helpful first, just simply, if we were to entertain a motion, accepting the policies, existing policies, except for the first part that deal with substandard non-conforming parcels, but that we would recommend that the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule be the first line in that policy.
Would you want to suggest their policy or a proportionality rule?
Their one looks pretty good to me.
Through the chair, I've heard, just in terms of discussion, I've heard what Commissioner Silver has mentioned, which would be replacing the floor area limit with the proportionality rule and otherwise the existing controls like for daylight plane.
Yeah.
Then I heard Commissioner Wong, who endorsed the proportionality rule up to 3,500 square feet, and then for parcels less than 3,500 square feet, and then beyond 3,500 and beyond, applying the existing .48. I just want to remind your commission those two are out there.
Yeah, mine was just as I stated it. I didn't intend to include a further, in all respect to my colleague, whose logic and thinking I very much respect, I did not intend to incorporate that suggestion. And I'd be willing to make what I just said as a motion.
If I can rephrase your motion so it all fits in, because I took notes as you're doing. It would
It'd be great to fit it in. I want it to.
Okay, just as I heard your motion, enact the proportionality rule to control house size on residential nonconforming parcels. Apply the proportionality rule in concert with existing controls related to 1, daylight plane and facade articulation features, 2, use permit review for parcels less than 3,500 square feet, 3, design review committee review, and 4, no exceptions to floor area and height limits.
That is correct. That's exactly what I intended to say.
Then,
I do have one question. I think in cases where we do have zoning districts that have higher minimums than 5,000, George, do you think it makes any sense to go to a percentage to either 3,500 square feet or 80% of the minimum requirement of the zoning district, so that if it's a 10,000 square foot zoning district, if something's...
I'm not really in a very good position to answer that because I think the existing requirements, I on behalf of planning staff support the existing requirements and not the proportionality rule, and I'm not really certain if I understand the 80% proposal that the council had.
Well, what I'm understood, doesn't relate to the proportionality rule.
No.
That relates to requiring a conditional use permit. If currently it's at 30, if a lot is under 3,500, well, which is 70% of the 5,000 in a 5,000. But I guess there was a concern from the audience mentioned. Well, what about zoning districts that have a higher minimum than 5,000? Does it make sense to have a conditional use permit if a house is, well, let's just say more than 25%, or a lot is more than 25% under the minimum required of its zoning district? You'd be looking.
The logic that we have been using with the 3,500 was that in the 5,000, the zoning districts which 5,000 is the minimum parcel size, that if one can build a house that meets the setbacks and other zoning requirements and it's greater than 3,500, it won't need use permit review. I would think that as the minimum parcel size increases and the ability to meet the setbacks and those other zoning requirements will be that much easier, it doesn't seem appropriate for that closer scrutiny when you have a much larger parcel to work with.
If you have a 6,500 square foot lot in a 10,000 square
Right.
zoning district, that increased degree of scrutiny isn't going to yield the same kind of benefits it would where you're talking about 3,000 square feet and a 5,000.
Exactly, because usually in those cases, they're able to meet all of the zoning requirements because of the size of the parcel that,
I would.
No, I understand.
I would be happy to make the motion that you helped me word as you suggested it.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
On the question.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. So the motions are to accept the Half Moon Bay floor coverage, anything that's under 5,000 square foot lot, is that what it?
No, it's substandard for the zoning district.
No, maybe I can clarify the answer. If it's a non-conforming parcel, vis-à-vis the parcel size is less than what's required by the zoning district. So in this case, even if the minimum parcel size was 10,000 square feet and you had a 6,500 square foot parcel, you would still apply the proportionality rule. So the way I understand Commissioner Silver's motion is, in terms of house size only, you apply the proportionality rule to all non-conforming parcels independent of the minimum parcel size. And then the balance of his motion was that for the other elements related to like daylight plane and facade articulation and use permit and design review, those all stay the same.
Right. So,
So
what
basic, yeah.
So basically what you're saying is you want to apply that 33%
If
full
you,
coverage, or 33, isn't that what it said here?
well, the 33, I was a summary, I was saying 30 to 33 is what it works out to be for parcels that are 2,500 to 3,500. If you want to look at it arithmetically, it's basically whatever the minimum parcel size is, which is here it's 0.48, and then times the degree of being out of proportion. You see what I mean? So the proportionality, in Half Moon Bay, the proportionality rule is applied if you have a 0.5 FAR and your parcel was 2/3 of what the minimum parcel size is, then it's 2/3 times 0.5, and that's your FAR. If we were now to apply it in the county, as Commissioner Silver's motion is, the FAR is 0.248, so that's the starting point. And then, doesn't matter what zoning district you're in, what the degree to which you're less than the minimum parcel size, that's multiplied times 0.48, and that becomes then the new FAR for your particular parcel. So if you had let's make it easy. If you had a 10,000 square foot minimum parcel size, okay? The minimum parcel size is 10,000 square foot. You have a 5,000 square foot parcel, okay? That means you're 0.5. Okay, 0.5 times 0.48 gives you what? 0.2?
0.24.
0.24. That's your FAR.
So basically then that the full coverage area would be half of 5,000, a little bit more than, close to half of 5,000.
Well, half of what you could
No,
have
it's-
had if you had a full-scale lot.
But the example that he's using.
Right, it would be, if you had a 5,000 square foot lot, and I said it was 0.24 is what you said, that would be what, 1,200 square feet, something like that, roughly. Yeah. Now, I haven't talked about, I'm not sure, if you're talking about the proportionality rule, you're talking about Half Moon Bay's requirements, and I kind of gave a soft pedal to what their parking exceptions are, and I'm assuming that that's kind of worked in as well. In there, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I think if a parcel is over 55% less than the minimum parcel size, you get a free 200 square feet for parking. I'm assuming that that's rolled into your request. Do what Half Moon Bay does.
I was willing to, yes, it was.
Okay. So what I would just say, maybe we say enact Half Moon Bay's proportionality rule.
Right,
We're not-
and tell Half Moon Bay that we've done it. Maybe we'll get some they're always telling us to listen to them, and this time we're doing more than listening. We're following their example, potentially,
Well,
depending on what the board does.
Okay, I got a problem with that, because I really doesn't like that, because I understand when the parcel is to a point where it's, 2,500 square foot lot or 3,500 square foot, but as the parcel get bigger, I don't, I just got a problem with it.
Would you
But
be,
these are only non-conforming, right?
yeah,
So
but
they're-
it's a question of,
Yeah, but I think the concern is, non-conforming just means it doesn't meet the minimum parcel size. It's pretty clear with the 5,000, when that's the minimum parcel size, we are talking about lots that are 2,500 and 3,000, or even now with the proportionality, 4,000 or whatever. I think what Commissioner Wong's talking about is when you have a zoning district that's much larger, that it could accommodate a good-sized house, like a 10,000 square foot minimum parcel size, and you have a 5,000 square foot parcel, now that is the house size is being reduced because of it being non-conforming.
Right, that would reduce to 1/4.
That's exactly.
That's,
Yeah,
I want to add one more thing, that if you take this approach, we do have a zoning district in Seal Cove, which is 20,000 is the minimum parcel size. So if you had a 5,000 square foot parcel and you're in Seal Cove where the minimum parcel size is 20,000, then you are 25%, so then you do 25 times 0.48, and that tells you what your minimum parcel size is.
Well, I'll tell you, I live on a 17,000 square foot lot. The neighbor next to me has about half of that, and I really appreciate that the house there is significantly smaller, and to end up having a house that I tend to think that it's going to have the proper effect. And again, a parcel that's only 5,000 square feet in a 20,000 district should have a house that's much, much smaller and should be discouraged.
And I don't mean to be arguing the merits or I just want to be able to accurately provide the facts so you're fully informed. And that's the reason I'm explaining that there are zoning districts that have 10,000 and 20,000, and we would be applying the proportionality rule there
and
too.
in addition, let's take a case where, let's say in a 5,000 square foot zoning district, someone has a 4,500 square foot lot. You might say, well, gee, it's pretty close enough for government work. Why does it make much difference? But in case where someone there, the way this would work, you'd take 0.9 and multiply, and 0.9 would have a modest, they'd still get 90% of the normal FAR, so it would have a modest effect.
And hence that's why it's called proportionality.
Yeah.
Sounds
I don't know. I think I'm somewhere with Commissioner Wong on this issue. I think from, if you look at the historical subdivision patterns and when some of these substandard lots were made, they were made with small houses in mind. And so I think a proportionality rule for the zoning district where we have, the 5,000 square foot maximum and a lot of 2,500 square foot lots makes a great deal of sense as a matter of public policy and fairness and consistency with the way the subdivision was laid out. I think it makes, and therefore would probably be defendable. I mean, I'm interested in being defendable as opposed to being, agreeing with Half Moon Bay. I guess I struggle with whether a proportionality rule in a 20,000 square foot zoning district where you're trying to cut somebody with a 5,000 square foot lot down to a house that's consistent with the house size you used in this area where you had a lot of 2,500 square foot lots. I think that's not correct. I don't think we should do it.
Just as a point of assistance, in that spirit, I think with with that suggestion, Commissioner Silver's motion could be revised to say, in areas where the minimum parcel size is 5,000 square feet, the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule to limit house size. In in areas where the minimum parcel size is greater than 5,000 square feet, we continue with the 0.48, and then everything else is the same with the daylight plane et al.
Well, there's one other possibility that occurs to me, and that's a modified proportionality rule in the law. And what David said and Commissioner Wong has said as well make me think that in a zoning district that's larger than 5,000 square feet, instead of having a stronger proportionality, what I'll call the strong proportionality, a la Half Moon Bay, take the degree that the lot is under, would yield a fraction. Let's say, just for an example, a lot that's 5,000 square feet in a 10,000 foot zoning district, that would be 0.5 or 1/2. If that were to be averaged with 1, that would yield a proportion of 3/4 or 0.75. And so we'd have a much gentler proportionality rule that would apply in, there'd still be proportionality, but far gentler in its application. And we could even, if we want to, we could even go into the 20,000 square foot district and average the fraction with 2 and then divide by 3. And the effect would be to make it even gentler still.
Well, just to insert numbers, the when you say one, which is the minimum parcel size, right now the minimum parcel, the floor area limit is .48. So I think what you were saying is, if you did the proportionality rule and you came up with a .25, you would average it with .48.
Exactly.
In each case, it would always be averaged with .48.
Right. That's another way of stating it. If you simply took the fraction of by which the percentage that the lot is of the minimum, the proportionality takes that percentage it is of what the minimum required, and multiplies the allowable FAR standard by that to come up with a new FAR standard.
I think to say it simply, we have the existing approach and we have the proportionality approach. You take the outcomes of both those and average them together.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you could even adjust that and weight one more than the other if you want to make it even gentler still in the larger zoning districts. But for simplicity's sake, what I would, in light of the discussion, I'd like to modify my motion to have the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule, what I'll call strict proportionality, apply in the 5,000 square foot zoning district. In zoning districts greater than 5,000, apply what I'll call a modified or gentle proportionality rule that would average the outcome of the strict proportionality rule with the current rule. So it'd be halfway in between.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I think people finally got here.
Well, I don't.
Well, go ahead.
What's the average?
Let's get Commissioner Nobles in.
It seems to me like the problem is with those 5,000 square foot lots. And why not make this simple and just
Just .48.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Nobles is saying is much like Commissioner Wong, that if you focus your attention on the parcels that are less than 5,000, it'd be the proportionality rule for parcels less than 5,000 and the status quo of the .48 for greater, which is what Commissioner Wong said.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's getting majority adherence as opposed to, and I'd be willing to so modify my motion.
And I'd love to hear that. We all have it so modified. And second, gentlemen?
We call for the question?
Yes.
Call for the question?
Okay, yes?
Okay, yes.
Aye.
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 I think that,
Well, now we take it to the second
a
part.
certain amount of equity.
Well, one thing we didn't, just to come back to the affordability question, that the current chart for affordability was made in reference to the existing standards. We're talking about new standards now. We'd really need a new proposal for affordability. And would it make sense to have something brought back to us?
Well, I think wouldn't that be part of the housing chapter?
Yes.
Can we do it?
Can we do?
Well,
Can we take it up? That I don't want to.
Your action today, by being silent, by taking an action that embodied the proportionality rule and the status quo, you have left out, I think intentionally, the affordable housing incentive alternative. If you still want to work that in, then it would be germane to bring it back in this forum. If you want to keep, if that's separate, if that's not what you're taking action on today, then that would be dealt with the housing chapter. I mean, I took by your motion.
I would be interested. My motion was not meant to go to that question. I wanted to settle the one thing that I thought we could agree on, and I would be interested in pursuing, whether it's as a part of this or if it's appropriate as a part of the housing chapter, considering building in some type of incentive for affordability. And I'd like to pursue that. The figures we have before us are based on the current, aren't compatible with what we just did.
I think I understand the question now. All of this is in the context of conceptual approval, because we're going to have a final at the end.
Right.
We said that in the opening. What we could do is we have your actioning concept today related to the status quo and the proportionality. How affordability incentive will be woven into that in the future will be based on additional numbers that you'd like to see and further discussion. What we could do is bring back at another time, and I have scheduled in this process at least one meeting for bring back type items.
Yeah.
We can bring back to your commission how you may want to adjust the action you took today on this first part to
encourage, somewhere on the continuum from encouraging to having a more solid proposal for affordable housing as it relates to non-conforming parcels.
Yeah.
So
And
we
it-
could put that in the minutes, too.
Please, Ralph. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Would it be desirable if we had
Yes.
an emotion, and a motion, excuse me, that would accept just that recommendation from you, that we have that.
Well, maybe you could restate, because I'm not sure the numbers that you need. Why don't you restate
Okay.
the motion?
The numbers that are in the proposal to encourage affordability are based on, were not based on using the Half Moon Bay proportionality approach. They're based on current requirements. And what I would like to see, I'd like to state that it would be the Commission's request that staff bring back to us in the later portions of this process revamped numbers that would relate to the new standards incorporating the Half Moon Bay proportionality rule that we just voted for, so that the proposal to encourage affordability would relate to those new numbers, not the old numbers that we're no longer want to be using.
And just as a point of clarification, when you talk about new numbers, are you talking about the numbers that we attempt in our staff report to show the cost of building a house? Or are you talking about?
No.
I didn't think so. Are you talking
The
about?
square footage numbers. Square footage numbers.
Oh, okay, so when like if I did a comparative chart, it would be, here's what you approved today, and here's what that affordable housing project proposal is, like we had on the screen. And so we'd have, so you'd be able to see how what you tentatively approved today
Well, I think you need a new proposal, because if you put those numbers back up, we'd see that the so-called market rate house, the square footage allowed in that is higher than the maximums we just approved. And so that's not consistent. The proposal there is not consistent with our action. And so we need a new proposal.
We have one final thing to settle here.
One moment, George, for just a second. Ralph, go ahead, please.
And when we get to the merger.
We do need to get to that as well. Yeah.
And I'm going to have to leave, and I'd like to
Oh,
vote on that one. And this
have
other
50
stuff, we
we
can
have-
settle after I leave.
Commissioner, sir, can we just go ahead and direct the staff and come back with a number and on the future meeting? And
So what you want is, so I'll have this option, but instead of this column would be what you did today. So
You've got to have a new existing zoning. It's got to be proposed zoning instead of existing zoning, and the numbers in the incentive proposal need to be revamped to take into account, because the numbers there would not be realistic given the new proposed.
Oh, I see.
John,
Okay, and
can't
we'll
we
move on
just
to merging.
suggest-
We'll move on to merging in 1 second. So what you're saying is, in preparing the affordable housing alternative, I came up with lowering it to 0.39 and raising it to 0.53 to be a incentive. What you're saying is reevaluate that and maybe come up with new incentive and new disincentive numbers?
Given that we've got a new proposal for what may become existing.
We can move on to merging.
Now, we can,
Okay.
John, we can just suggest, that's a suggestion. We don't
That's
need-
good enough.
We don't
Let's
need,
go.
good enough, thank you.
Okay, we got it. We
All
move
right.
on to merging, that's 3, B, and C, which is going to come on the screen.
I'm willing to make a motion to accept that, what the staff report based on 1, 2, and 3, that merge now, and merge at time of the housing enlarge or demolish.
And that's,
I second that if that's a motion.
I
Yeah.
would,
Under discussion, I'd like to say that I'd like to have the mover and second maybe accept some small additions to that. I mean, I'm fundamentally supportive. I think we should add to that a motion to direct staff that county staff it is not within their public duty to advise people how to evade merger requirements or to so-called adjust ownership. If questions come up about that, they simply say you need to get your own private advice on that. We're not allowed to discuss that with you.
How about making it more stronger and say to discourage staff from doing that?
You're the one with the motion, you do it, and
I agree to that.
And in addition, that also staff be directed to look at the practicability of moving on to doing something about what I think is, was it C in here, to merge the remaining ones that are the lowest priority, but we don't want to, I think there's reason to believe that that should also be of some urgency, though not as high
maybe as I suggested in my opening presentation, maybe the wording could be, if after B1 and 2 are completed and staff resources are sufficient, that pursue comprehensive, or maybe we'll put it this way, after,
You were right.
actually, I think I got it. After B1 and 2 are done, we come back to the commission for direction of whether to initiate comprehensive for number C.
Well, and I'd even go a little bit further and say that effort be made to find staff resources to put that on a priority basis as well.
Okay, so the two parts are find staff resources to make it a priority and come back to the commission after we've done B1 and 2 to
No later than that. Come back sooner if you can find the resources.
If we, right, a resource. Okay, I think I'll come up with the wording on that, and then to consider doing a comprehensive for C at that time, but that the commission considers.
We definitely want 1 and 2 done right away.
Right.
And to the extent you can do C right away too, that would be nice, and definitely come back.
Well, no, I think we'd come back with C. We'd come back right away if we got resources.
Right.
And if not, we'd definitely wouldn't come back no later than when we completed 1 and 2, independent of our resources.
And you have included in there the discouraging staff from advising.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that yes.
Okay.
Got that.
Can we have a second? We had a motion?
Second.
And a second?
Vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Now, I do believe this is our day's work's done.
And it's 25 to 6. We're on time.
What an incredible job we have all done. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
By feet per second when we couldn't just specify the pipe sizing. So and I was wondering if this would allow someone to play with the pipe sizing but maintain the velocity and therefore be able to get a different size piping that wouldn't be beneficial in the long run. So I get what you're telling me is that the 5 feet per second will take care of making sure no one
That's correct.
does anything that's going to be a long-term negative impact.
That's
Okay.
exactly the intent of it, right?
Okay, then I don't have another question.
Is that designed for domestic flows, or is that designed criteria for fire flows? I would expect that if you're pumping 1,000 gallons per minute, you might, can you?
This is for average flows,
So,
distribution system.
so when you have a fire event and they actually are pumping 1,000 gallons a minute from a hydrant, which is what we're supposed to be able to meet, the flow velocity could be higher than 5 feet, 5 feet per second
It can
typically?
be higher, yes.
Okay.
But it's a temporary situation which is not going to physically affect the pipe.
Any other questions? Someone, do we have any questions from the audience? If you do have questions, please ask your questions at the mic.
Okay, well then, how about I move resolution number 1280?
Well, let's close the public
Oh.
hearing.
Okay, do that first.
I'd like a motion to close the public hearing
I'll
and a
move to
second.
close the public hearing.
Okay. Do we have a second on that? Okay.
Okay, I'll move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Let's move on.
Someone heard it after the resolution.
Make the motion.
Resolution 1280, approving the water system standard specification as submitted by our district engineer.
I second.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 2.
I did have one further question. Do we have this available in electronic form so we can put it on the website?
Good. Okay, item 2, review and possible action concerning selection of a driller to drill test wells in the Martini Creek Ocean View Farms area. I see George has stepped out for a moment. Move to that. And I will read the request for qualifications was sent to 8 drillers. The RFQ asked for proposals to dig 4 test wells in the Martini Creek Ocean View Farms area to be located as shown in the attached aerial photo. If one of you gentlemen would like to hold it up for the camera. All wells are located on the Peninsula Open Space Trust land, and the district has obtained permission to drill these wells on the property. The County of San Mateo has not yet issued an approval to drill these wells, but the approval is expected within the next few weeks. Proposals were due on Monday, November 3rd, 2003. The district received the 2 attached proposals for drilling test wells. We had one proposal from Magoria Brothers Drilling in Watsonville for a sum of $82,700. We had a second proposal from Wilkinson Enterprises in Half Moon Bay in the sum of $20,120. We had a letter from Earthflow Drilling saying that they had quite a bit of work for the next couple of months, and if the permits got hung up, they'd be happy to give us a bid and work with us in the spring.
Madam President, members of the board, just as a summary, we've reviewed this with our technical staff